just contextual. Does that make sense? You get in, I don't do that. You're all editorial shop. You also kind of want to see the context.
Oh, yeah.
Like why does it change it? Or
Yeah.
just curious.
Yeah.
But you have some stuff in, and yeah. Awesome.
Share the motions.
Welcome, everyone. Sorry, we're just a couple of minutes late. I'm Kathleen Alder. I'm the mayor of Providence, and this is the city council meeting for Providence. We have Jeff Nebeker, Janelle Seeley, Carrie Kirk. Oh, I forgot Brent. I'm sorry, Brent's dead. Carrie Kirk and Josh Polson in attendance. So welcome. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance by Jeff Nebeker and a prayer by Janelle Seeley.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful to be gathered to be as residents and members of the community of Providence. And we're grateful for the participation of our citizens. We're grateful for those who have taken time out of their schedules to be here with us and to discuss issues before the city. We pray that all bless us, that we can reverence the freedoms and the duties that we enjoy, and that we can act with respect for the responsibilities that are given to us. Pray to help us to enjoy our time tonight as we discuss the issues before us as a city. Pray that any of those that are here that need assistance with their health and their strength, that they may be blessed with that. We're grateful for this beautiful valley that we live in and for the safety that we enjoy in the citizens in Jesus Christ.
Thank you. We truly are blessed to live in this beautiful valley, and as we look around and see what we have, where we live, and the people that live around us, we truly are blessed. So thank you. It was suggested several meetings ago that the council reports are really best given when everybody's here, as opposed to after everyone's gone home and it's late. So we'll have a report from council. Anybody want to volunteer to go first?
I'll go first this time.
Okay, Jeff.
I don't have much.
Okay.
But yeah,
Summertime.
my mind, it's summer, but my mind's on tomorrow actually. But
Yeah.
So I'm still working on this system with I call We the People of Providence Network, which is a network and organization of Providence citizens to just have more communication amongst citizens so that they can communicate with our local government here and staff. So I'll just continue working on that. We went through the code quite a while back, and we'll talk more about that later today, I'm sure. I think I have a lot of questions about this whole process of code being new. And I guess my only question is, as we go through it, I would like to understand more the process of what we do to change the code or revise it, update it. That whole process is new to me, so maybe that can be answered later on in our discussion with the code. But I'm really interested in going through that and fixing things that need to be fixed or updated or completely taken out of the code, maybe because they're outdated. So I think that falls under one of my goals and duties on the council. So planning and zoning, there is no planning and zoning again. I'm not sure what that means, but I guess it
We didn't have anything for the agenda, so
we're just working on the things we have in planning right now that are the developments that are under construction. And I think we can talk about more of that later in item number 2. Mosquito sprayer went around last night, sprayed in front of my house. I still have 5 mosquito bites, and mosquitoes aren't gone. So
They didn't
maybe
get the message.
they're spraying, but I still have bites all over me and my family. They've got bites all over them, and fewer
Were you
apples.
out there when they sprayed, so you could get?
Well, yeah, I went out there and tried to get them to cover me with the spray too. Not really. But maybe fewer
Not a good
apples
idea.
and fewer raspberries on the tree. So maybe that's a discussion we can have later on in city council about.
Well, that's the county.
That's probably
Let's
actually
go to the
us.
county meeting.
I know 2 other cities decided to not. Yeah. Sprays, but we still have bites. I probably have more bites if we didn't spray, right? Anyway. And that's all.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'll go.
Okay, that'd be great.
So again, coming back to, or coming to emergency preparedness. Thanks to the good work of Ryan, we have our brochures in hand, have a couple thousand brochures in hand and 200 in Spanish. And these are to be got into the homes. We have 3 stakes involved in helping us get them out. I've had 1 stake report back. They have 1,170 households, and we'll be in the process of getting those brochures to them, as long with the QR codes, fridge magnets with a QR code on them, so that those households will have opportunity to have an emergency management brochure in their home, as well as access to the city everything. Anyway, so this is our brochure, and this is the little fridge magnet. There's emergency preparedness tips, Providence City. We hired this from Logan City, who was more than happy to let people use it anywhere in the valley. And so we changed it a little bit to fit our cover, and I like the fridge magnet. Ryan had a good suggestion with that. There you can just put your QR code on that, or your phone on that, access directly to the website of the city, and see what you need to do for emergency preparedness. And we also have a,
So Brent, excuse me, so when they click on this, they will get this booklet
they'll
as
get this
well.
book on the website.
All right.
Yeah, they'll get this information on the website. And the intent is to get one into each household, as well as the fridge magnet. That is the intent. The South Stake, there is 1 ward, Providence 10th Ward, who wants an emergency management fair type training. And they're going to do that early in September, and we will participate in that with them a few minutes and explain and work with them. River Heights, I've had contact with the new River Heights representative. The old one changed positions between the time we started this and the time we're at now. And that person is happy to be on board, and he's going to work. So we'll have, for the River Heights Stake, have the wards, the 5 wards in Providence that belong to the River Heights Stake. The River Heights City is also interested in doing something like this for their community. So they might pick up on that too. So we feel great about moving forward with this emergency preparedness. And, we feel like we're doing something to make a contribution. I'd like to mention the water. There was water up high above Box Elder Springs that was not getting into the flow coming down the canyon. And our water master with some others went up, and
Is this Spring Creek?
the Spring Creek took some pipe and piped the ditch where it was losing the water, piped it around, picked up the equivalent of about a ditch full of water, which is great this time of year. And so our water's held up pretty decent. On the weir at the beginning of the season, it was 0.33, and now we're still at 0.25. And here we are into August, and the water is holding up. City's getting water. Things are working well. So we appreciate the committee that worked all that out. And it is doable, and those units can function together. That's all I have to report,
Goes back to us being blessed
for sure,
to have the water that we need.
for sure.
Thank you, Brent. Janelle?
The biggest thing that I have to report on is the school board has started meeting again, and their building task force. Their update is it actually is a lot in Providence. Our Providence Elementary is at 108% capacity, and there's nowhere to put portables there. Spring Creek is 400 students below a regular middle school capacity. So they are working. They've done a Python analytics survey. They have to decide by August 25th if they're going to go ahead and put that bond on the November ballot. The $110 million bond. And I can have some information on what that's going to cover, but
That is on their agenda.
it's on their agenda tomorrow night to make that final decision. And if they're going to proceed now or hold off on that. But the amount that they're looking to bond for would hold the rate. They wouldn't need to increase the tax rate to do that. But the projects that they're planning to address would be building a middle school on the north end of the valley and the south end of the valley. So there is a middle school that feeds every high school. So North Cache would feed Skyview. The new one that they're proposing would feed into Green Canyon. South Cache is Mountain Crest, and then they want to build one. They have the property in Nibley next to Heritage Elementary to build a new middle school. And they're also adding a vestibule after the Uvalde incident that happened in Texas. At the high schools, the new high schools have those already, those controlled access points. They have a pretty sophisticated locking system where they can program when the doors are open and when they're closed, which I didn't know. I thought that was interesting because I thought high schoolers come in and out of the building in all kinds of directions and all kinds of places, but they can lock down the building while the kids are in session and open the doors for open entrance and access. And they added that this summer to Skyview and to Mountain Crest. And they're adding, they called it hardening schools, which I think is kind of a sad term, but that's what they called it. To go ahead and have buzzers at every door. The doors lock once the school bell rings for school to start, and they have to have controlled access point into the building and be admitted by the office personnel to actually get into the building. So those things are in process. They found space for those in the budget, but adding the vestibules is part of the bond. And they want to transform Spring Creek into another elementary school for our area. So that's kind of the direction that they're heading. Whether it's on the ballot or not, they'll decide tomorrow if they're going to put that on or if they're going to wait until. So, but they have plans already in, like the building plans. They've already selected those. So it sounds like they're ready to hit the ground running. They just have some transportation things to work out in Nibley for the site that they've got the property already.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so we have 20 youth that are signed up for the youth council this year, which is awesome. They cleaned up and started working on their float for the city celebration yesterday, and we have an advisor that's kind of the liaison for the city celebration, since my personal life has been a little crazy the last couple of months. I wore my city celebration t-shirt. You're gonna want to get one of these right out of the gate. I think they're gonna go fast. In fact, I had someone text me today, and I don't even know how she knows, but she's like, where can I get one of those cute trucker hats? I'm like, well, you better be first in line after the parade tomorrow. They are still in need of some volunteers to help on Thursday and Friday. I just looked at the Sign Up Genius, And I'm the only person signed up for the 50 spots that they have requested. They need setting up of the stage on Friday afternoon. They need help with parade traffic, setting up the chairs on Saturday morning. There's going to be a really cool art tent that they're going to create pieces that will all be put together and hung here. They could use some people to just help children with the art. And then, of course, cleaning up at the end of the party on Saturday night. So if there's any citizens listening and willing to pitch in to make Providence a more united place, there are some needs, and I can point them in the right direction.
And firework cleanup on Sunday, right?
Yes, Sunday morning.
Several of us volunteered
No.
for fireworks. We're not doing that.
Ixnay on the fireworks.
I was gonna say, I understood the fireworks were out. Was that not true?
I hadn't heard.
So
I haven't heard that either.
It went from fireworks to a light show, and then I think the light show is out as well. So,
It's
yes,
a sunset now.
yeah.
beautiful sunset. It will be a beautiful sunset.
That's a good
So
one.
this is going to be amazing launch. Janelle and I were there last night at the end of the pickleball tournament. The first night, there's another night going on tonight, and it's just fun to see that sense of community, which is an important thing for me when I ran for council, that we create a sense of place, and relaunching the city's celebration is an important part of that. I did also get news today that the gal who did the Easter egg hunt last year can't do it this year, but would be happy to train someone for this coming year. So we'll be on the lookout for someone to head up the Easter egg hunt if you have any ideas.
We'll have to have a sign-up sheet at the celebration, because the people who attend there are people that like to be involved. So
Yeah.
perhaps we can get somebody at the event. Thank you. That is a lot. Especially since you were gone most of
Not in
July.
July, busy in August.
Just a couple of things for me. So I serve on the Historical Preservation Committee as a liaison. Not a super eventful committee meeting last month. Talked about some website updates and schedule for attending the city celebration. So not much there. I did attend a half-day retreat last week that was put on by the State Office of Outdoor Recreation. So they're working on a strategic outdoor recreation plan, and that was held out at American West Heritage Center. It was kind of cool. We had representatives from, I don't know if all the cities were there, but a lot of them in the valley. And then also the jurisdiction units like U.S. Forest Service and park rangers and things like that. So it was really interesting.
So it was well done.
It was really well done, actually. Yeah. It was long, probably longer than it needed to be. But one of the neat activities that was part of that is they've been going around. So they divide the state into 7 different regions, and they're doing these in each of those 7 regions and engaging community leaders in that. And they had some very large maps that were floor to ceiling on each side of the room. And we identified as a group managerial, social, and environmental issues that relate to outdoors. So anything from urban trails, conflict that can exist between groups, guns up the canyon came up a lot, and cleaning up after those, RVs and balancing noise pollution and desire for some outdoor serenity. All those issues were discussed, and they'll take all that feedback and prioritize that in terms of I suspect probably where funding goes for various projects, where policies that they may want to put in place to support that. So I think it was really, really worthwhile and insightful. Had a lot of different conversations with other cities, and then provided feedback to the state. And so I think we'll probably see that strategic plan. Those things work pretty slowly. I would bet it's probably like 6 months before we see something, as an outcome from that. But it was really well done. And
Is there a way for citizens to be involved? Was there a citizen group, or was it mostly?
there weren't any
cities?
There weren't any citizens there. Oh, you representative, you were there. We met on last week. So, but I didn't see any residents per se. I think there were mostly cities that reached out to represent their constituents.
I was wondering if maybe Laura, that might be something that you would be interested in.
Definitely not.
Oh, okay.
With you
all the success.
Well, I know at least a couple of those issues are important to you, so. So
Guns
those
up
we're
the
talking about.
canyon.
Yeah, well, and it was interesting, we talked about social issues with conflict, and I was up, I think it was up the canyon 2 days later at Providence. And there was a large airsoft rifle match going on over the trail, and I was running, with my headphones in, and it's like, you guys can't shoot projectiles through here. So there are issues that we have in the city. As the city grows, the population grows, people desire to use natural resources differently in the outdoors. We have to kind of figure out how to properly manage those so people can do what they enjoy, at the same time manage conflict and preservation, things like that.
Right.
So it's really good.
Mr. Alton, are you familiar with the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance?
I'm not.
I'll send you some information about that, because they're very involved in trying to convince the federal government to keep some of the motor vehicles off of their land, our land. So I'll send you some of that.
Yeah, thank you. That was a
Great.
discussion quite a bit in terms of, what's the proper balance between the use. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, council. Just a quick update. The garbage RFP has gone out. We're waiting for that. It'll be a couple of weeks before that will come back. We'll see what it comes out at the consortium of 18 mayors. We did have 3 cities back out. Smithfield, Richmond, and Lewiston have all said that they want to do their own thing. So we'll see what that means. But I'll keep you updated.
They backed out before the RFP was issued though.
Yeah, well, as it was being issued. So that
So were they excluded from, because one of the
They
big
are-
questions from that was if it would go out
they're
and then they would
excluded.
withdraw later. Okay.
They are excluded.
Okay.
So we were able to tell the
They'll get a more accurate count. right?
bidders that
That's good.
they were not in there. So it's about 5,000 households maybe. So we'll see what that does. They're going to give us a bid on what's left. I told you about the Land Conservation Board last time, and I am now chair of that. It's the Lee Ray McAllister Fund, and it manages a fund of money that helps people put their land in conservation easements. So I'll just be reporting on that a little bit more as we go along. Wanted to let you know that Visionary is going to have a booth at the celebration. We're going to have a meeting of here in town. They felt like maybe they could reach more people by having a booth. So that will be at the celebration. And then I need to, the parade is Friday evening. I will send you a text and let you know where and when. You want to ride in a car, you want to walk along. We have frisbees that we're going to throw out instead of candy.
So we can knock their teeth out instead of rot them out, right? Yeah.
You know, yeah. So is your preference to walk or ride? Okay.
I think I'll walk too.
My preference is to walk along and it's not very far and it gets you up close and personal with the people instead of being in a car behind the window waiting.
Unless you're offering motorcycles, and then I'd do that instead.
I'm not offering
Okay,
motorcycles.
all right.
Just let's be clear. Okay, so I'll text you when to come. Motorcycles run over people. Unless you're a policeman. Okay, so thank you all for that report. I hope it was good for the people who are here rather than having to wait to the very end of the meeting. I'll close that portion of the meeting and we'll do approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from the last city council meeting.
Okay, we've got a motion by Josh,
I'll second it.
second by Brent. Okay, any discussion?
I thought they were good. There is a typo. Hold on. Look at the word trials. It should be trails instead of trials. It's like in line 40 or so or somewhere on there. You'll find that. That's the only typo I caught. It's,
We appreciate Ty and his efforts and the good job that he does on the minutes.
I'll abstain since I wasn't here. I did listen to the meeting and just as I make this comment, I grab my mic because it's so hard to listen when people aren't close to their mics and audience members too. I mean, you just can't know what's going on if people are not speaking into a mic.
Good point. Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, I'll entertain a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, motion carries 100%. This is the time now that I'll close that portion of the meeting and public comment. This is a time when if you have something to talk about that is not on the agenda that you would like to share with us that's within our purview, we invite you to come to the mic. State your name.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. John? And what was your name?
John Drew, Providence City resident. I had a question for Janelle. The discussion about the schools and middle schools and all that, and the middle school we've got here has been going on for a number of years. But once upon a time, the school district was going to give to the city of Providence Elementary. But they retained 2 schools, elementary schools here in Providence. Or close one of them.
No,
down.
they
You know what
keep
they're-
them both open for capacity.
What's that?
They'd keep them both for
them both.
capacity. Yeah. They weren't planning to close one.
Just curious. And for the record, for whatever reason, I don't get bit by mosquitoes. My wife does. I grew up in Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. And
Must eat garlic and onions and all that good
I
stuff.
must have grown up and gotten immune from all the mosquitoes and all that.
Thank you, John.
Al Hanson, Providence resident. I live over on the corner of First East and Second North. Is there any further information on the progress on what they're wanting to build as far as homes or whatever it is down that street to the north, down First East in the big field down there? You know the one I'm talking about?
The 55 plus community.
Yeah.
Is that-
Is there anything going on there? Or-
West Bear's old property? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
not
what-
sure what the status is. They're in the process of working on it.
It's, they didn't decide to do a 55 plus, did they?
Yes,
It's
that's,
a PUD?
mhm,
Okay.
yes, that's what it is. And it was all approved. And we're going through the construction drawings and they've been signed, I think, haven't they, Rob?
Right on the contract.
Yeah, it's a construction thing.
So it's
Okay.
still in the works.
There was talk, at least that I heard, that they were planning on making them put in curb and gutter sidewalk down that street. Anything there? What are they gonna do there?
That's part of the development agreement. Any development that comes in is required to put in.
Okay,
Finish the road width for the parcel that they own.
and it's not gonna go any farther than that then?
No, it would be up to individual residents to decide that with their own property.
Okay, because my concern is the irrigation water that goes down that street that's right on the east side of my property. That,
But the tow water and.
That's always been your concern, hasn't it?
yeah, because trying to put in a sidewalk and curb and gutter along there would eliminate that. Or they'd have to cover it. And
Ryan or Scarlett, you want to address that?
We oftentimes have irrigation that is in conflict with the area, like we have on First South. We have a storm drain and shared irrigation line. And when construction is going to occur there, it will be piped, but there would be boxes to still access
So, but this one would be the construction of just their property and we're not looking to do anything beyond there. So they're just theirs, but if the city were to construct or were to require a developer to construct, they would be required to still allow access for that, but they would pipe it sufficiently sized that it could allow the water, but they'd have to pipe it. They couldn't just shut it off and back you up. It doesn't do that way. So,
All right. Well, that's,
So it sounds like it's in the plan.
yeah, okay.
so
Thank you.
Thank you.
But we do have other areas where in the city where it's piped too, and I think it seems to work fine.
there's areas that are piped.
Well, as long as there's access,
Yeah.
that's my
Right.
concern.
Yep, we'd have pipe and access. That would be
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting. Thanks for those who participated. We have with us tonight Sean Milne, who is the economic development guru for the county, and he has a presentation. And I'll let you preface that, Sean, just tell people how that came about, who's been on it.
You bet. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for this opportunity. I am Sean Milne, I'm the county's Economic Development Director and a recovering politician. So here with the former part of that role, I thank you for this opportunity. By a show of hands, for your benefit, all those that have participated in the Housing Crisis Task Force that are here this evening, could you please raise your hand? I wanted to highlight that Scarlett's being far too modest there. She barely raising her hand. So you can see here that we have several members of our task force here this evening. And I want to give a special shout out to John Drew. Of course, it sounds like you all know him for good reason. And Karina Brown. But everybody made really meaningful contributions to this. The genesis of which is my boss, county executive, David Zook. He'd obviously, much like yourself, right? He's going to hear from a lot of constituents. Some of those will be other elected leaders like yourselves. Others will be citizens and businesses. And I can personally attest to having accompanied him on a couple of meetings with businesses that are existing in the area. And it's really no secret, and that's probably why you entertained this opportunity for us to come and give the presentation this evening, that housing is a bit of a challenge in Utah, and certainly Cache County is not alone in our struggles for the last couple of years. But it's really been exacerbated by the pandemic, but it is hardly only because of the pandemic. We've been falling short of housing inventory and a growing problem, particularly because our culture believes in some good growth. Most of us have participated in this activity ourselves with our kids and grandkids and have contributed to that, but not to get ahead of myself in some of the findings. So Executive Zook put together a task force that, and by the way, thank you, Ryan. He's going to be my Vanna White this evening since I don't have linkage here. So I'm going to be,
just point me out and we'll get her there.
I'll say next. And
We can
let's-
see the TVs, but this one in front of
It's
us is
not on.
not on.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much.
We have the
Councilwoman.
deck too. They give us the deck ahead of time.
I did modify that.
Oh, you
It's
have,
kind
okay.
of nice to
So
see
the
it right
slide
from
deck
us.
is going to be slightly modified from the one that's been provided. Actually, I'm going to give a bit of a nod to former Mayor Sean Dustin behind me. I really liked his presentation to me not too long ago, and so I kind of used his modified deck, and then I modified it just ever so slightly. But generally speaking, that slide deck is going to be the same information. It has not changed anything in the report that should be part of your media packet. So there's those two elements that you had in attachments that I saw. The actual report and then the slide deck. So while I continue to buy time while Mr. Snow fixes
It's okay,
the
we can see
technological
the
problem.
big TVs. I just,
David created this task force, of which again, I'm one of the co-chairs, Mayor John Drew, Karina Brown, and we put together 50 different stakeholders. This is some engaged citizens, some builders and developers, some government regulators like yourselves, city and county. We have Representative Dan Johnson, of course, behind me. He and Senator Chris Wilson were a part of this as well. And we had some industry titans here in the Valley and the county. We had some academics. Next slide, please, if it's up and up.
Okay. So I've kind of provided some time there, but let me backtrack here and tell you that the primary reason was the extreme shortage of housing. Of course, because of the limited supply, we then saw prices rapidly escalate. That's of course only part of it, because part of it is the demand, but that demand being even higher, increased our prices. And then the impact of ability of employers to hire and grow. Now, this is near and dear to my heart because as the county's economic development director and on loan to cities like your own, on behalf of the county who employs me, but I provide services if you ever have an economic development project or just want some advice and counsel on different aspects of CRAs and things of that nature. The ability for businesses to grow is a big deal for us, right? Like this is your current tax base. Those current businesses you have, if they have the opportunity to grow, and should you be so blessed as to be able to retain them in your city limits, your jurisdiction, this is a good thing, right? That's how you help provide the residents who have a 45% coupon rate on their residential property taxes with the superior services and quality of life that you provide them. So as is with most places in Utah, we want our employers to be able to grow. And if they face competition beyond our state boundaries where maybe pricing of housing is more affordable, maybe unemployment rates are higher, meaning employers that grow in those areas have more folks to draw from, all of those are definitely important to us. Next slide, please. I've already kind of reviewed here who was on our committee. Thank you, Councilman Roman, by the way, earlier for reminding us to speak into the mic. I'll try my best, but if you catch me looking away and not doing so, please remind me. You see here some of those groups and subsets. Also notable, we had 3 subcommittees that talked about supply. We had one about public education and the data collection as it was used by the group as a whole. Next slide, please. The mandate was that we wanted this to be a turn and burn. We didn't expect this to be something that dragged on far longer than would be useful once the data was collected. So we were told that we had a 2-month time frame or 60 days. And as part of that, we wanted to identify causes, quantify the magnitude of some of those causes and the need, survey public perceptions, and of course, make recommendations by the time we were done. So you'll find in the report, which I have 3 hard copies here. I've provided a couple already to certain members, so that's available for members of the public as well as any other council members that may want it or staff. You'll find a summary of findings, the primary causes, and a focus on impactful solutions. Next slide, please. So this current year, well, maybe I'm behind. One more slide, right? This year, the Milken Institute rated Cache Valley and Logan as the nexus of that as the #1 most desirable small community in all of the nation, which is fantastic because I can tell you that I know there's well over 3,000 counties throughout the United States, and I know it's some magnitude obviously greater that are cities, and among the small ones, we're the #1 best. Unfortunately, though that's the aggregate and we rank tops, we are number 178 on affordability of housing. So a bit of a problem there and a bit of a disconnect. At the same time, we all know that residential property values have skyrocketed in recent years. And unfortunately, homeownership, as indicated by the number 178, is out of reach for many that are currently in the valley, and more so that would like to stay in the valley. According to the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute, we will need to add over 11,000 housing units between now and the end of the decade. So we have less than 10 years to add 11,000 in the aggregate with all communities in the valley. Next slide, please. In order to just keep pace with our current growth. Again, I've already mentioned this about supply, and as a result of limited supply, we have an increase in housing costs. I think most notable here is that while our population grew by 20% in the last census period, the last decade, 85% is our own kids and grandkids. So again, I alluded to this earlier, many of us are of a culture that well understand, and even if you've only lived in the Valley or Utah for a short period of time, you know that it's very important to Utah to have large families. It's kind of one of the things that we're known for, and you're going to see that repeated through the report, the official report that you have, and a couple of times even in the slide deck tonight. But there's a lot of
insinuation that our growth challenges in the state and here also in Cache Valley are because of those people moving in. Yet the reality of it is the data does not merit that kind of criticism. It's predominantly us. And so I'll leave kind of a rhetorical question that we certainly address as a task force, but one that you, like all the communities in the county, will need to ask itself: do we want to keep these kids and grandkids? Do we want to keep our family members close? Or are we willing to, for the sake of different decisions that we'll make, see them leave at the sake of keeping out other people? We again note the overwhelming demand, and there's even an additional shortage of rental inventory. So it's not just the homeownership inventory that we're shy on, but certainly that, and it's also the rental inventory. Next slide, please. I'm just going to skip through this. I know I'm reading a lot of the slides for the benefit of those that might be following along on the Zoom platform, or for the audio recording that you'll keep for record. So I'm just going to read these real quickly, but I feel like I've already emphasized them enough. Utah's housing market faces a severe imbalance that creates record price increases for homeowners and renters. And there is, quote, an extreme shortage of available homes across most socioeconomic levels. I think that's an understatement as well, because I think too often critics will say that may not want growth or may not want different types of housing styles, that we seem to characterize it as just a low end, an entry end, as if it's one particular strata. And we find this gap to be far more than just one, and even more than a couple of different socioeconomic levels, to which I can actually personally attest, taking on this new job and moving here a year and a half ago. Most people could not afford to purchase the home that they're in today. This is most Utahns could not afford the home they're in today if they had to buy it within the last couple of years, just because of the prices. Now it's even exacerbated when you look at what the Federal Reserve has done to interest rates in the last couple of months. That's exacerbated further still. 75% of households ages 25 through 45, okay, are priced out. Again, I think that it's really oftentimes stated as though it's the entry-level homeowners or college-age students that might be akin to a renter. It's oftentimes thought of as, your mid-20s, your early 20s, maybe even up to your 30s, that might just be starting out, in air quotes, as those that, well, it's unfortunate that there's no housing for them. But certainly most of us would seem to characterize that if by the time you're in your 40s, you're established, you're likely in the upward trend of income earning years. And those folks are struggling as well because of the prices and the limited inventory. Next slide, Ryan, please. Again, here we have a graphical representation of the quantity of homes that are for sale. Now this report is a little bit dated because of what I just noted. We know that the Fed interest rate hike has meant that there are homes that are lasting a little bit longer, but generally speaking, it has not changed much of this trend. Unfortunately, some well-intentioned reporters will say that demand has fallen. That's not entirely true, because if you're 30 years old and looking to move out from your childhood bedroom or start a family, the demand is still there. It's just now increasingly inaccessible to more people. So that first graph on the left that says that homes are for sale, and you can see how much it dropped in the last couple of years. It has inched up, but it doesn't mean that it's more accessible to more of our kids and grandkids, that 85%.
Will you clarify if that's homes for sale or housing for, how are you defining the word homes there?
Homes for sale, so ownership inventory. It could be condominiumized product, but it's an ownership product. It's not necessarily rentals. Okay. It's how many homes are on MLS, the multiple listing service. So, if you're a realtor and you're looking at MLS to either show your clientele or just kind of get a feel for what the marketplace is, this is the quantity of those that you would find on MLS. Again, I kind of alluded to this earlier, so I'm just going to interject my personal experiences from last year. There was a point last year where there was 32 homes in the entire valley for sale for about a week period. Obviously, there's a lot more than 32 families that would either like to move out from their childhood bedroom, or students, matriculating from the university or Ridgeland College, or working professionals moving in. So pretty tight market. Again, this is inched up a little bit.
On a personal,
Sure. Yes, Councilman.
on a personal note, where did you move from a year and a half ago?
I moved from Tooele. We have a little bit of a housing problem too, to which
committee members have heard my analogies that are very similar here. Again, it's not isolated to just Cache Valley, but yeah, anyway, so from 12. Sorry about that, thanks.
Well, I don't remember that the report had statistics about rentals available.
I
Was more focused on.
Is anyone else here?
Home ownership.
Specifically? Well, but it's,
We
so
probably
it
should look at that,
concentrated
too.
on ownership product. It concentrated on it, right? Because certainly,
Right.
I don't want to devolve too much. And I know that you've got an agenda you'd like to move on from. As an economic development professional, you want a majority to be ownership product for sure. It's how most Americans move upward through the class, middle class system. It's how most of us accrue our net worth. It is certainly a retirement strategy for some. Regardless, and I'm welcome, I welcome follow-up conversations. I'd actually love, because I'm a geek about this sort of thing. This is where I wear my economist hat. I'd love to delve into that. But rentals, obviously, for most people are also a transitory kind of product. I don't know about your personal circumstances, but whether it was my single mom and me growing up, or whether it was my own experience in college, I had a rental product right before I got into ownership product. And so it has a lot to do with, one can establish themselves in a community while having rental product and building up whatever kind of creditworthiness that might be before you eventually, settle down and have that ownership product. So you want some, you don't just want it to be entirely ownership product, but at the same time, you wouldn't want it to be disproportionately heavy only on that. So I'm not sure if there might be a follow-up question to that, but it was a concentration there on predominantly.
But part of that 11,000 would include rentals too, because we've got.
It's housing units, correct?
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Probably ought to, something that we ought to further explore, but you and I can pick that up.
Agreed. And again, I welcome that kind of opportunity. As do all the other members too, by the way. They're gonna just come to any of us. Here we have kind of a matrix chart that I want to really just concentrate on two elements. Here, the average home price, right? Inside of a decade, well, just a little outside of a decade, actually, because we go earlier this year, you can see how much of that price jump there was, right? In 2010, the average home price in Cache Valley was $172,000. Okay, 12 years ago, $172,000. In May of this year, it was $503,000, just shy of $504,000. Now that's average, which tells you that there are some lower and there are clearly many higher, right? It's not the median, but it's your average. So 185% increase. Now the next part that, again, with my economic development hat on, get a little geeky about, we've got an unemployment rate that back then, when it was 172, we had an unemployment rate of 6%. Now remember 2010. It seems like a long time ago when you look at the economy today, but that was in the middle of the Great Recession. Okay, it's still one of the lowest in the state, but it was 6%. When you look at today, we're at 1.6. Now this is a little bit dated as well. We're actually just a couple of tenths higher than that, but we're still one of the lowest in the entire state. As of December 31st, to kind of put this in perspective, we were the lowest unemployment rate of any county in the entire United States at 1.0. We're really, really good at what our businesses do. We are really, really good at providing a safe, inviting place for our kids and grandkids to grow up. We are really, really good at what we do, and our businesses capitalize on that. And as such, they employ an awful lot of people. And to the credit of our culture, our folks are not content to just sit at home. That 1% unemployment just a few months ago, that's a great testament to who we are, right? And we're still, again, the lowest, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the state, which continues to lead the nation.
Can I ask how you come up with that number? Is the unemployment rate based on,
And thanks, Ryan. I realized I hadn't said next and you were following along. Thanks.
the unemployment rate based on job openings within the valley, or is it based on employed households? Because I know a lot of people are choosing to work remotely. And that's our personal situation. My husband's company is based out of Boston. We don't know that.
So Department of Workforce Services is who produces our unemployment rate. So there's a lot of trust and faith in all working professionals in my field that will take that, and they have their formulas that they use in the background.
They also, calculate things such as what our commutership is versus inflow and outflow every day. I can tell you that these are seasonal numbers. It's actually a little bit higher when you take out non-seasonal jobs. Case in point, with a university, in our county like we have, and with tourism being a very popular part of our economy locally during the summertime, we do have some seasonality. And that's also true with our agriculture jobs, fair, right? Like we're going to have some of those jobs are greater occupancy, greater jobs in those fields in a seasonal sort of capacity. Beaver Mountain clearly is not going to have as many people employed right now this time of year as they will in the wintertime. So they have this calculation that is the Department of Workforce Services, and I'm repeating what they've shown us every month. Mhm. Great question, though. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. I do have those slides. Go ahead. I actually covered these as I was talking about those next two elements. Thank you. All right, so I've already noted the highest birth rate of any state in the United States. Again, we're good at what we do, and we love our families. I've already covered that this is not true, although it's oftentimes quoted that it's because of these folks that moved from out of state, right? That's just simply not true. Because even out of that 85% in the last decade, that's just how many moved into Cache County. Think about that for a moment. I appreciate Councilman's question earlier. I moved from Tooele. I didn't move from out of state. So even among that remainder of 15%, it's not all from out of state. Some of that is, those of us that are from out of county, but not necessarily out of state. And we, of course, kind of knew that this was coming. Envision Cache had predicted this population increase, and we're on par. Really interesting. I was at an airport authority meeting just a couple of weeks ago at the county building where I work, and there was a report, and it included on the backside a narrative of a guy that had worked for the airport a number of years ago, about 15 years ago, and it was telling. It was interesting, at least, because he noted that back then, about 15 years ago, that there were folks that were anti-growth, that didn't want our valley to change, that didn't want to see the quality of life diminished. This report noted how even still, while some things change, some things don't, right? Those attitudes still persist with some, and they're still valid. Like nothing about the Housing Crisis Task Force is invalidating those attitudes. It's a reality that, of course, folks like yourself have to work with. That there's this debate about, do you want growth? Can you simply pick and choose where that growth occurs, not only by destination of the city block for a commercial center versus a residential subdivision, but even what kind of growth, right? Whether that could be, multifamily, single family detached, residential versus commercial, manufacturing versus retail. So as it is with, population is going to continue to grow. Next slide, please. So the overarching argument for why the supply shortage, and it is argued that we don't have a free market. And I think most of us can agree to varying degrees. We don't have an absolutely free market. We may partially have one, but between localized zoning, between building preferences and consumer changes and tastes, you're going to have minimum lot sizes, minimum square footage sizes. We don't exactly have a free market for housing.
Tell me what you mean by free market. I don't understand that term.
Love that. Thank you, Councilor. If all things being equal, if there is no government regulation whatsoever, and you just take this in general economic terms, what products would we have? What pricing would we have? Arguably, if you didn't have regulation requiring seatbelts and turn signals and airbags, arguably, you could have lower costs of vehicles. Fair? I mean, if it were a free market and you didn't have government regulations or price constraints, or supply chain has been such a great term used for the last couple of years, and part of where your pricing is going to come are tariffs, right? Now, those aren't something city councils or county commissions or councils can govern, but all of these things have an impact. Even whether or not you require interior fire sprinkling is going to have an impact on the overall cost of a commercial building or maybe a hotel.
But
So
there are choices.
correct.
There are choices which limit some of those things, such as the fire sprinkler system. You brought that up. There are choices where not every person, every home is required to have a fire sprinkler system. We have choices.
Yeah, that's correct. In a different life, I remember whether or not we adopted and debated adopting the International Building Code, International Fire Code, right? And when you do, you necessarily, add some additional regulations that a developer might recoil, might push back on.
So is it fair to think of the free market more as a spectrum rather than a binary though? Because
Yes.
because I think that's the misnomer with that is it is or is not. It's a spectrum of those things. And as a society, we decide where those lines are for various industries and everything else for reasons. So you do agree with that point?
Absolutely.
It's much a spectrum.
I think that you find all of our members would agree that it is a spectrum, right? You can be very heavy-handed, you could be laissez-faire, but most of us are somewhere in between. And most of us are going to be somewhat responsive to the citizenry or the local culture and our expectations. Next slide, please. And case in point, what are the consequences of doing nothing or just simply maintaining the status quo? So again, for the benefit of the audio record or those joining us in Zoom that may not be able to see, housing and jobs go hand in hand, certainly something I'm very passionate about. Again, I'm just going to use this opportunity to give you an anecdotal story. A few months ago now, Executive Zook and I, we went to a current employer of several years in the Valley. They're a good employer. They're those kind of jobs that we want for our kids or even ourselves. They have some upward mobility and they're a good growing company. The reason why they wanted to meet with us is quite candidly, they were telling us because of awarded contracts they had been given. They were only a couple of months disclosed, and so this was a new and kind of hot topic for them. They would gladly take every graduate from USU and Bridgerland Technical College of certain types and still need more. Okay, so they need more than our local community can produce. 3,100 jobs in the next 9 years. One employer, and I can tell you many others anecdotally that I've met with in just this calendar year so far that have very successful companies, very successful opportunities for us. If you're looking for one of those style jobs, that's upward mobility for us. That's not just an entry-level job for some poor college student or some economic migrant from Ogden that wants some of our jobs. These are very good opportunities for us and our children and grandchildren, and that's just one. But where do we put those households for 3,100 jobs? Even assuming that there's no duplicates in a household of say two spouses working with the same employer, not to assume that they're all brand new households, but most of them likely will be, right? Some of them will shop from one particular employer they're at today to that one. Where do we house those folks? And so this was the very real conversation we were having with the CEO who'd set aside time to speak to their elected representative and say, this is a big deal for us. This is a very big worry. Now, what I'm going to tell you is as a county, as a community, if I mean it in the terms of the aggregate of the county and the state of Utah have incentivized that company to be here because they had other options and they were exploring those other options when they came here years ago. And so those other options still kind of exist and they could certainly take the awarded jobs that they have and they could expand somewhere else because they're going to need to expand their physical footprint and they're going to need to expand by their employee count. I'm telling you with trying to keep some level of confidentiality here, this is one of those good employers we talk about in economic development that we want. This is a win for us. But what a terrible loss when the CEO says, but we're seriously considering moving to another state. Because again, the housing crisis isn't just localized to Cache Valley. Because our competition, they'll take this opportunity and they'll take the market share, if not here, if not us, then someone. And so we may expand some of these jobs elsewhere. And that's unfortunate because the median wage of those jobs are the kind of median wages that we want when we're seeking to recruit or to retain employers. So that first bullet point definitely speaks to that, as well as the second one of talking about high-paying jobs. We of course can't control everything with regards to wage creep, but wages have crept up a lot in the last few years, predominantly out of necessity. But even still, it's not growing at the same rate that housing prices are growing, right? Because the builders and developers and previous homeowners can sell their inventory for a lot more. And so over time, the average age of Cache Valley residents will increase with little available
that's affordable to young families. And then that last element is bolded for quite the cautionary, consideration for us all to ponder on. We will banish our children or grandchildren to live somewhere else where, according to how at least most households seem to raise our kids and grandkids, we tell them that these are the rules of society. You get good grades, you earn those, you go to college or tech school, you get a good education, you get a good job, and you have your own household, whatever that might look like. And therein is kind of the crux, because I leave that kind of open-ended, because what I've learned is that younger generations don't necessarily want the same kind of product that I want. And I can tell you now that my aging widowed grandmother doesn't necessarily want the same product she's always had. And so I think all too often we think about the quandary of growth and the quandary of inventory type as one particular socioeconomic strata. And I can represent to you that it is far more reaching than that. Next slide, please.
I really appreciate your report. I do think it's important to use good and accurate non-inflammatory language. And I do want to call you on the last bullet, just because the word banish does mean to send someone away from a country or place as official punishment. Okay, so I'd advise you to, it's been very good that until that moment, I'm going to call you on that one. You choose your words better.
I actually really appreciate that. And there was a lot of, is it fair to say, debate internally on whether or not to use this word? Because it was a group consensus.
Yes, I'm enjoying your report, and I agree with most of it. I just want to be sure when that happens, their hackles go up, and I don't want that to happen. I want us to remain open to the ideas, and it's best when I think our language is factual and neutral.
Appreciate that. That's actually a really great comment. And
Okay.
as alluded to there, it was a conversational topic amongst the group. All right. So again, thank you very much for that, because I think we'd all agree that we want folks to listen, but it also, a case in point, like it did catch attention, and we also wanted, I'm not going to get into debate about whether or not that was wise. It just is what it is, but I appreciate your input. All right. So housing myths, we don't understand high density. Great ideas, just of course, not in my city, not my backyard. All that density should be in Logan. Or it's, quote, those people that bring crime and trashy neighborhoods. Again, Councilman, I understand that even some of these could be construed as punchy. But I hope you would also agree that these are sometimes what we would hear in public meetings, right? Higher density will reduce home values in our neighborhood, and quote, everybody knows high density becomes run down after just. So our recommendation. Thank you, Ryan. Next slide. We categorized some recommendations here that I'm going to zoom through real quickly because I already know that we've gone way long. Next slide, please. Federal, of course, these aren't things that you or I, the county, the task force, the city can do, but a lot of these are macroeconomic elements. And since they're in the report, to save time, let's skip that. Next slide, please. So state government, let's go back to state government because we do have Representative Johnson here. So there are some recommendations towards what referendum may do, right? This is obviously a very touchy subject, not just in this municipality, but one I come from and one that everybody struggles with. I'm going to say this just so that you recognize council and mayor. Certainly Janelle and Mayor Kathleen know this, having participated in it, but the Housing Crisis Task Force recognizes and appreciates nobody runs for elected office hoping that by the time they're done, 51% or more hate them because of the decisions that they made. And sometimes it can be very confounding to try to balance what the public says they want in one breath and what they say in the other. And I love how you brought up that it's not always a binary choice. Sometimes it can be. And that's, of course, when it can be the most confounding. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. So again, we come back to the state government recommendations, and the third bullet point is, I love to use this quote that you can't improve what you don't measure. And so at some point you may need to create a measurement that says, what are your goals and how are you accomplishing those? What metrics have you created to measure your progress with those goals? And then the last element that was a recommendation is to create or support programs that might help first-time home buyers. Next slide, please. So this is part of the first two bullet points here, that we want to work with the task force and under
Executive Zook's direction, we want to work with, area jurisdictions. This isn't a problem created by any one. It's not even a problem created by a few. We all have some skin in the game. More rural communities oftentimes will say that they'd love to see a reversal of the brain drain. Their kids grow up and they move away, right? And coming from a place with those kind of communities, and can oftentimes tell you that within the Utah Association of Counties, or UAC, you'll hear rural county folks talk about that phenomenon far too often with a lot of desperation. And yet their communities are not very inviting for new families looking to grow even from within their ranks. So again, to the second bullet point, conducting meetings with leaders such as yourself, because we believe that providing a comprehensive or at least a collaborative countywide plan that respects that the individual jurisdictions will have an individualized approach, but that we're all part of the mix that need to be thought of in the totality of what our county has to offer. Likewise, the third bullet point, we want to preserve open spaces. Mayor Kathleen had mentioned that earlier, that the county has agreed to put on the November ballot for folks to weigh in on whether or not they'd like to have a particular financing vehicle for preserving some open space. And then,
John, can I ask a question on
yes,
that one?
please, Ryan. Yes.
How do you see the preserving of open space? Obviously, your economics, and if you take more off of the out of the market, won't that increase? Will that? How does that take in your economics? I appreciate your economic space, so I'm trying to understand you want to preserve open space, but doesn't that then reduce the number of available lots to build, and then create some of that self-fulfilling prophecy that we then have less and cost goes up? That's one is an interesting one for me. How we balance that.
Thank you. And I love the use of balance. Since we're having some wordplay, I would argue that it would not restrict the quantity of available lots, but it may restrict what those lots look like. Maybe lot size, maybe the type of use permitted on lots, but it doesn't necessarily restrict the lot quantity. Certainly it can by what is allowed in a jurisdiction. And if there are certain minimum lot sizes, then certainly if you're preserving some open space, you just look at the aggregate total of available acreage within a jurisdiction, you reduce some of that and take it off of the market for housing, whether through commercial development, because you've zoned for that, whether it's recreational development. I was thinking of like a mixed use rec facility or something specific to a particular type of athletic, whether it's open space preservation for public use. You make a really great point, and certainly one that we struggled with, but we had 60 days, and I can tell you, like, I can delve into some sidebar conversations, but they were not officially part of the Housing Crisis Task Force. There's even one US Senator that represents our state that has an idea on how we might potentially utilize some public lands that abut municipal boundaries, specifically releasing them from federal control in order to provide housing. So there are options out there. But your point is well stated that if restricting inventory, aka restricting supply, while demand is growing, is obviously going to create an increase in cost. Your point is well stated. Did I sort of kind of at least acknowledge the question?
Yeah, acknowledged and fair. So I just next one.
Certainly what I was kind of allowing or alluding to there is the allowance of some denser development. While it says here in the county in incorporated areas, that's just as true for cities that are in the next slide. We also wanted to acknowledge that as you price out local current residents because of housing, one of our most prolific commenters in the Housing Crisis Task Force noted how one particular development in recent years was about 70% occupancy of widows, right? Like now a singular person household. And if you're on a fixed income and you're older, you're used to a dual income, or whatever the case may be, you could even think of it in terms of divorce or someone fleeing domestic violence and maybe has been a provider at home and not in the job market for quite some time. These might be localized residents. You know, what does this overarching element mean for even how it might affect homelessness locally? Again, we didn't spend too much time on that, but we just wanted to acknowledge that in that bullet point. And then again, it's this last bullet point is kind of holding ourselves accountable by, you know, you can't improve what you don't measure. Next slide, please. So here, as it pertains to cities, the general plans that I mentioned earlier and some development philosophies that emphasize a mix of inventory, not being heavy on just one inventory type. It's certainly one of our strong recommendations to municipalities. And then an education campaign. I alluded to this earlier when I said that none of us run for office with the idea that when we're done, we want 51% or more to be unhappy with the choices we made when we represented them. And so there's a certain amount of acknowledging that we need to educate the same populace that's growing our population on how they may need to be part of the solution, right? And that's me trying to be very politically correct about how, you know, there may be cognitive dissonance that while at the same time you're creating a large family, are you acknowledging that the same market conditions that you want for your offspring to stay close to you will also necessarily invite others that might also be locals as part of that 85%, but it might invite other folks that are from outside the area. We kind of covered these already. Let's zoom through the next few, Ryan, because I'm so backed up here. Let's just breeze through. I'm thinking.
You tell me when to stop. What you want? Where?
Let's go past the Chamber of Commerce right after that. Okay. So the overall task force recommendations are conducting some outreach, having education, and this is a two-way street. Yes, we think because of our 60-day mandate and 50 different stakeholders across different, you know, chosen professions and different views and perspectives on this topic, that we've done our research, but it doesn't mean that we've got it all, and we want to. We also recognize this is a very complex topic because let's be honest, if it were an easy topic, somebody would have figured it out by now. But at the same time, we firmly believe that just like little old Cache County, Utah is the #1 best county in the United States of America. And we also recently earned from Verizon the top business environment for small businesses and entrepreneurial startups. This trend is going to continue for us. And if we can earn those kind of rankings for those, we also feel quite gutsy that we can also be the first to signalize a shift in how we can address such a gargantuan challenge here. And thus I allude to the last bullet point. So we need a cultural shift. Ryan, the next slide, please. More of the same. We'll just end here. The next slide says thank you. I also want to acknowledge Executive David Zook because this again was his genesis. With a lot of coaching from other elected leaders in the Valley who felt like this problem was bigger than any one jurisdiction. And he said, okay, I'll accept that challenge and put together a team of folks. So with that, at this point, I haven't answered questions as they popped up, but again, I want to acknowledge there are others here. Do you have any other questions that maybe other folks targeted in specific points? Yes.
So I heard Ryan ask this question in a county planning meeting that I was at this spring or early summer. And that is, do we know how many units have been approved and are like in the pipe, but not yet built?
Karina, do you feel comfortable with the email we've sent recently to those members of our task force? Do you feel like you can speak to that?
Come on up to the microphone.
Executive Zook wanted me to reach out to all the cities in Cache Valley and to ask that same question. So I have that table for those that responded. So Providence was one of them. So thank you.
So can you tell us?
I don't have it memorized. I can look it up on my phone while I'm sitting and then come back up. But
Yeah,
think have the
I mean,
table
because
in there.
that 13,000 is so huge, but Ryan, how many does, or Scarlett, how many does Providence have in the pipeline that aren't built? I mean, it seems like we've approved so much, and to continue, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a valid question, and it's not addressed in the report.
Well, I just wonder, different cities are at different states in terms of open space. I look at, we're like, we're running at, our other options are infill then, or what do they call it when you turn it over and turn it into something else? Probably redevelopment. You know, we're getting to that point where those are our choices.
Well, and I think Providence City has a certain responsibility to respond to the need. But certainly it's not all our responsibility to respond to the need. When you take a look at the percentage wise of the state growth, Cache Valley has over the 10 years had 4% of the growth of the state. So if you translate that to each community in Providence, we have responsibility for 4% of the growth over 10 years. You start looking at those numbers, it changes the picture. Now, I recognize that there's going to be an influx of other people coming in. And I think Providence has been very proactive in looking at alternative methods of housing. And we have lots being built, and some are, there's a broad range of housing. And so I really think, and one of the statements I have trouble with is why a housing supply shortage. Developers only build housing they're allowed by local government. I don't know what you call a developer or a builder, but on the other hand, you can build a house with 1 bathroom, 2 bathrooms, 3 bathrooms, or 10 bathrooms. That's not governed by the city. You can build that many bedrooms, or you can build 1 or 2 bedrooms. That's not governed by the city. I think that statement brings out in me, our young people don't have choices in the size of homes that they can move to. You know, the roof on a home nowadays costs more than my first house. It really does, because of the magnitude of the roofs, the way they build them. And so, you know, I stop and think, what happened to, we have to have equal to or better than our parents, or we got to be better than the next door neighbor, or we got to be, and this is not local government that's promoted that. It is the market driven. It is the builder that's building them so they would be attracted to their house. And by doing so, the prices have gone up, as you have shown. There's no, years ago, there used to be a 235 home. Government helped 235 home. A lot of people build a home with bedrooms hardly big enough to change your mind in. But that's the way it was. That's the way it was. And I have to think back. We struggled with that in our early marriage years. We didn't have 14 bathrooms and 12 bedrooms and all that stuff. We had to struggle with that. And as we then vacated that home because of our economic stance, be able to buy another home and improve our lot, that's how we moved up. But that's not the way it is today. You look at the homes, there's not many homes being built to give our first-time home buyers an opportunity to build or to get in at a level they can afford. That's part of what I see as the problem. Sorry.
Brent, does somebody still live in that home?
What's that?
Your 235
Yeah.
that you built?
Yeah.
Terry, in February, we had 19 developments, 471 single-family lots, 238 multifamily, and 7 commercial. That was in
That were
February.
approved, but
That
not
are-
yet built.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
there's a
the
lot
rate.
in the
That was
pipeline.
about 709 units back in February.
So I have this table I can send all of you. So thank you. You have some really good questions and points, but so to be completed in 22, 23 in the approval process kind of, there's 2,092 apartments, 0 condos. Countywide.
Okay.
907 townhomes and 1,394 single family homes. So that's a fair amount, and that's without all of the cities responding.
Can you give that number again a little slower? I don't
So
like this.
sorry about that.
That's all right.
So 2,092 apartments. 907 townhomes. And
1,394 single-family homes. And that was with 10 cities responding.
Out of 19.
Out of 19. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Kirk, that was a great question. I'd love to address Councilman Bart, Brent. You may be correct, and I will absolutely attest that, you know, absent of maybe former Mayor John Drew and Scarlett that might have these, you know, code references in Providence City memorized, that may be true for here, but I can tell you that there are some municipalities who have minimum lot sizes, have minimum square footage sizes. So that may be true. Maybe more to your point about the 4%. I'm going to just offer an alternative way of looking at it. I'm not saying it's superior. I'm not even saying it's necessarily advisable, but I am going to kind of flip the script just to show a little bit here. Providence has some really nice things because in addition to how successful you are with businesses, just within your own city limits and how your residents within the city limits benefit from those and the quality of life that affords them, that they don't have to commute 45 minutes away. Like if you live in Black Swan, you know, at the north end of the valley here in Bannock County, or even, you know, Preston to come down into Smithfield or Logan for some of their shopping. You, like some of those other communities, get the benefit of other folks that may live in neighboring communities that don't have as many retail options. And you are the beneficiary of them exporting their community wealth. What I mean by that is their residents don't have localized shopping areas or options within their city limits. But flipping the script, silver lining as it may be, nonetheless, I'm just trying to offer an alternative way of looking at growth. You have the opportunity to supply things to your residents at the expense of communities nearby that can't offer their community members something to shop at. What I mean by that is, as you likely know, the Utah Sales Tax Commission, how they divvy up sales and use tax, you're going to get the benefit of 50% of one of those percentage points that are just by point of sale. That's what's excellent for you, right? So to the extent that you can attract folks from neighboring municipalities that don't offer the shopping opportunities that you do, that's great. And to the extent that you can attract some of those folks that are residents, that could be even better on the population distribution side of the other 0.5%. So again, I'm not actually outwardly disputing what you're saying. I'm just saying there's more than one way to skin that cat. I am a bean counter, a reformed bean counter. If you're a reformed politician, I'm a reformed bean counter. So I go back to that. So I'm slow in my numbers, but make sure that I got this right. Remind me her name. Karina. The report shows that we need 11,600 in the next 8 years. If I take that, divide by 8, I get 1,450 that we need every year without fail in order to get there. But it's not counting the default we have. That's just the additional growth. So at this point, if I totaled up correctly her number, if I totaled up her number, the approved ones and expected in the next 12 months, if I understood that right. Okay. However long it takes, I'm not okay. All right, we'll put that into perspective. That totaled 4,393. If we continue at the pace of approvals, will we have a housing bubble? If we approve at 4,393, if that's where we're at, and continue on that pace, but growth grows at a 1,450, is there a point that we run into the 2008 bubble of Vegas? I don't know whether you were involved in the bubble in Vegas, but in 2008, it was easy to find a house.
Plus, there will be homes that will be vacated by people dying or moving away. Or whatever.
Yes, the World War II boom. I don't want to reference the baby boom, but the other boom, the older ones, will start to die off and open up housing, which is maybe not included. I'm a bean counter, so I apologize for bean counting.
I know that, for example, for Nibley's numbers,
that's an aggregate of approvals over probably the last 5 years. So that includes Ridgeline Park, which is 400 of those units, which the approval process started in, let's say, 20. And so I think that we just need to be careful with that number because we know what's in the pipeline right now, but we don't know if that's the first week of pregnancy or if we're at 9 months and 2 weeks, because we're not looking at that. And the approval process, as you know, for any kind of residential development can be a really long pipeline. So it's not
So
necessarily.
it's not a scientific number.
Well, it's scientific in the sense that you can count it, but it needs context. And so we have the gross number of what's in the pipeline right now, but that does not
Yeah,
tell us when it started.
I think that's what Ryan's after, though. He's looking,
Yeah.
he's trying to figure out what is the throughput. He wants to know the pace of, change and not the accumulated. And I guess that's the question. We get misinformation if we look at what you've reported right there, but it'd be more interesting to look at what's our throughput over the last few years to see what the rate of change is.
Well,
And we
and-
look specifically at Providence, and the amount that we've approved and have in the pipeline, and it's a big portion of that Nibley too.
I
Yeah,
don't
it's-
think ours has been backed up either, though. I think we've been approving the last.
Yeah, we've been approving, but the building of what we've approved is not.
Well, the contractors will tell you that in Cache County, we build about 1,200 units a year,
A year. Okay, good.
just with the labor
Yeah.
that's available and the process and the way it's done. It's about 1,200 a year.
And Mayor, I
So-
think that's probably a better way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because the approval process is we're talking about paper lots
Uh-huh.
and we can improve an infinite number of paper lots, but when you get right down. to
And
it,
we've
there's
got
only-
labor and supply issues
Exactly, there's only
and
so many.
all those
framers,
kind
there's
of
only So
things.
many concrete workers, and then the pricing, what we're seeing in the market is that the price has risen to a level where that all works.
so that 1,200 number came from several contractors who said, honestly, if you look at the units that are completed in Cache County, it's about 1,200 a year.
Which this report doesn't speak to, like the infrastructure that has, I mean, it gives a lot of credit to zoning and to the cities, but not, to what has to be put in and the prep work. And I know that was probably beyond the scope, or even how builders could decrease the price of units.
I actually had a really interesting conversation with the head of one of the major developers in Cache Valley about that exact thing. Because my daughter is buying a house right now, and I wanted to know. It feels like there's a lot of profit built into some of these numbers. And he assured me that it's not, that they are making profit. But the profit is in line with their historical profits. There's not a big money grab going on right now. It's just that between wages and materials and the cost of land and frankly diesel, those costs have all gone up. So part of it's the market responding to the scarcity. But part of it is also just the reality of what it costs to build in Cache Valley right now.
So maybe it's not sustainable. Maybe this housing growth is not sustainable for the people who are trying to buy homes. That's part of the issue. We don't know what that'll be, but with the interest rates increasing, the inflation that's come on, that's changing the picture dynamics really fast. We don't know that this is going to be sustainable. And we all know what happened a few years ago when things weren't sustainable. People were selling homes, banks were losing money. We don't know it's sustainable. So we have to, as a council, as a city, we also have to make sure that we are sustaining or looking after our own citizens as we look to help the growth. That's a balance. That's a balance we have to do.
And that's exactly why Sean and Karina and John did this with Executive Zoom, because when you get right down to it, we needed to go and do some investigation and try to get some information so that the cities could have more so that they can try to anticipate. You're right, maybe it's sustainable, maybe it's not sustainable, nobody knows. But right now, prior to this report, there was a real lack of information about any of this stuff specific to Cache Valley. And so the purpose of the report is not to come in and wag a finger at anybody. The purpose of the report is not to tell you you're doing a crappy job and do better. The purpose of the report is really just to provide information, let you know what trends we're seeing right now, and really give you some ammunition so that you can put this in with all of the other information that you have and try to make the best decision possible for your citizens. Because that's all you're trying to do.
Well, if you don't start with a measurement somewhere, then you're just kind of letting it happen.
Right. And by setting this baseline, I think that one of the big hopes of Executive Zook and all of the people that participated is that more information will come in from the different cities, from the different stakeholders. Because frankly, one of the reasons that I wanted to participate, even though I was happily retired from that side of the desk, was that one of the big concerns is that if this really, let's go ahead and say, for argument's sake, that this really is a problem, or that even worse for those of us in Cache Valley, that the legislature perceives that this is a problem. We need to be prepared as a valley, as a county, and as cities and individuals with what we think needs to be done, whether that's nothing and have data so that we can support that, or whether that's something and have data that we can use to support that, or bless their hearts, those lovable guys and gals in Salt Lake will find a solution that works really, really well for West Valley City and Harriman and spread it like peanut butter over all of us. And that's what we're trying to do. It's just give you the information, let you know what we found out. And if you have more information that will help us to refine these conclusions, please, because every city in this county needs that, and every person in this county needs that. Sometimes I felt like my whole job was to stand out there by the snow sheds and the salt sheds at the top of the pass and just tell Salt Lake to leave us alone. And I think that we're in a better position locally to solve this problem than the state is, or the feds. But we have to have the information. We have to be willing to engage. So I'm sorry, I took Sean, that's my 2 cents.
I think that's a great way to wrap this up. I have more questions. I mean, sincerely.
Well, again, it's
I have
information.
one more question for you, for him, Mayor, if you let me ask one more,
No.
last one. Okay.
Yes, please do.
Well, one last one. In the slide, it presented that the housing shortage, why the housing shortage, the developers only build what housing is allowed by local government. If local government has provided approval for 4,393 and 1,200 get built a year, isn't part of that responsibility on the developer and builder?
I'm going to default to what Mayor Dustin just said. You know, the purpose isn't to finger wag, but there's certainly enough finger wagging to go around.
There's certainly enough people in the mix that can help this, but I think we all need to make sure that we're part of the play.
Agreed.
That everybody's in the audience.
Bingo, because I'm also going to say the citizenry has this cognitive dissonance too, right? Because I'll bet that some of the same individuals that have bought a home built by somebody else, whether last year or decades ago, are some of the same folks that come to public meetings and advise us not to approve, not to allow inventory built, whether it's a different type or whether it's just to take away that view of this bucolic countryside that is just down the street for them. I mean, it's all of us. It's builders and profitability, right? Like how much is enough? The Gordon Gekko, reference from Wall Street, it's regulations, it's supply chain challenges. It's this same federal administration that's kept lumber tariffs from Canadian lumber that the last one put in, like, despite the fact that they're so different in other ways, that contributes to construction costs, right? Like there's plenty to go around. It's the oil industry because of the plastics that are built into homes and new construction and the transportation costs to get raw materials to the job site or the workers to the job site. But it's all and it's everybody.
And I really appreciated the nuanced way that Mayor Dustin also referenced that there is a significant difference between what's been approved and what's been financially backed, or what's been approved in a PUD, but what's only been approved in the latest phase. The PUD might involve 250 homes, but the latest phase that's been approved is 40. You know, like you may be approved for the 200 plus, but you're only building 40 at a time. You can't build them all at once too. So, I mean, there's a multitude of factors. And I'd like to sum, if I may, this way, Madam Chair and Council, is that in addition to everything that Mayor Dustin just said about what this committee was put together for in an ad hoc way, and that we're perpetuating with this education campaign, is really to begin the discussion. Because again, like I said earlier, if it were simple, greater minds would have already solved it. You know, whether it was for political desires of their own, whether it was an industry looking to make a profit, or whether it was citizens that are not yet here, but the citizens that will vote for you tomorrow because they're the ones that are going to move in next week or next year. Like this would have already been solved. So it is definitely, you know, a gargantuan task, but the conversation needs to continue. And also with this closing thought, I had mentioned that while we think that 50 people is quite an impressive group to be able to move that quickly in governmental terms in 60 days with all these different opinions swirling around, we by no means represent all the answers, all the opinions, all the valid perspectives, and we need to acknowledge those too. So again, I invite you to reach out to any and all of us and to keep the dialogue alive. With that, Madam Chair, yield.
Thank you, and we appreciate the work to distill all of that information down into some readable formats that the regular citizen who's not steeped in all of this building and zones and all of those kinds of things. And so thank you for your work. And that's the reason that we had you come to this meeting, is because we want to get this information out. We want people to digest it, and we want people to begin the dialogue, because it certainly isn't the end. So thank you for your presentation. Great job.
One last thanks to you, Janelle, Scarlett, all those that participated. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Mayor, could we take a 3-minute break and reset for bathroom or anything? Is that okay?
Yes.
Joseph's got guzzling over here.
Drinking a lot of water.
Let's take a 3-minute break. Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to be a big part of it. I really do. I think a big part of it is we don't have the skilled workers. Skilled workers don't have the experience. And, you know, that's a big part of it. Anyway, do we have very many people on Zoom watching it?
Most will watch later. We're on the record, so most will watch it later, not necessarily watch now.
Watch it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your work. Yes, 60 days of hard labor. That's almost a
Oh, that's why you do.
I think we're good.
Tell me your name besides son. Caleb. Caleb probably really like him. Oh, nice. You're not all the time. Yeah. He designed it. Oh, nice. And ordered it. Don't be like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you don't want to use triggering language. Yeah, don't use triggering language. If you want people to engage in the discussion and actually solve the problem, don't.
We'll never be able to.
Well, for that cut.
I think that's.
It's fine for me.
When you listen to the
Recognize.
presentation, it's pretty one-sided, it's not a, right, so. and it wasn't really set up for a Q&A type of environment. You just have to engage with your representatives and say, well, this is a pretty, limited, well, and to have like 8 government recommendations and two private, like, it's imbalanced.
And no development.
No development.
No developer home builder.
Imbalance.
I think, and you know, I'm not criticizing, but I'm just saying, I, in the building world, see the other side of it.
They don't, but at the same time, I think that if you're gonna choose to do, you know, a smaller footprint for a home, it's on us to do really good planning, because if they want the ambiance that they grew up with, then you have to plan it well so that they have that difference on that. I mean, I look at the difference of my husband and I started out in Blackhawk. There is ample open space, in Blackhawk. Compared that to something different, like Gateway,
By Gateway, yeah.
there's no place to put a blanket on the grass for a baby. There's no place to throw a ball to a dog. Like, there's no space to function
Yeah.
and have that lifestyle unless.
Except
built
there
into
is
the
a,
code.
for that one, except there is a park that's right next and an open access that now has that. Now,
That makes the point that should the same point that you made about, should we be doing a $200 million bond for the government to buy up the open space? Should we build it into development regulations?
why you guys are there and I'm not.
That's why I needed a Tylenol.
That's a good question, because there is a good balance somewhere. I don't know what it is.
That is the word.
Where's
balance.
Jeff?
That's the word of the day, balance, right? Yeah.
Okay, I will resume the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, no, thanks, here he comes.
Yes, here he comes. But it's a start, so I appreciate the work that. Yeah. John, thanks for your work too, and your words of wisdom. Okay, so I will close the presentation, and we have a grant application. And we have Providence City Council will take comments and questions regarding the city's intent to apply for a COG grant for the intersection improvements located in the general area of 200 West and 300 South. So Ryan, do you want to open us up with this?
Yeah, I would, if that's okay. Many have been to the intersection at 200 West. It's also called County Road 238. At this intersection, and we blow this up if it works out. At this intersection, it's one of misaligned intersection. As traffic comes from east or west, the intersection really shifts, and there's not a good alignment, and it's shifting slightly, but so to add confusion, but not enough that it is calming. So the traffic on 200 West continues. The problem becomes is how and what we do with this intersection. It is identified as a major collector road. We would expect in the master plan, we would expect this road to take the volume of traffic that First 100 North currently takes. The master plan identifies within the next 5 years to be able to do something to help the traffic flow through the intersection, and within the next 20 years for a roundabout. This road will take from the bench all the way to not only Highway 165, but onto Highway 89 and 91. So this goes and connects two state highways, and it connects a large portion of our city. But the neck and the reason why a lot of people don't use this intersection is because of safety concern. They can go down to 400 South and come into that, and it's a T, and so then they can come right and come up and then turn left, and they'll work around what the master plan would try to develop. This also has a biking trail that would be planned through this section of 300 South, and so to fit all of those things that are future potential for this 300 South core, to do that, something has to happen with 300 South. If we look, I'm not sure it's on this one here. Oh, yep. If we look at the potential of a roundabout, and eventually our master plan indicates that a roundabout will be the need. You look at the effect that will have on at least two of those, the northeast and the southwest homes. This will be substantial impact when a roundabout comes. Now roundabout, the circle can be smaller and move, and there are different things. This was taken from one of the roundabouts we have, a single lane roundabout, and placed there to show the proportional size of what we potentially look at. At this point, yes. Yeah, that kind of shows what size this, it's a decent size. I mean, but it's not 2-lane, it's not Gateway and 100 North, it's 100 South. So it is still single lane, but does have that kind of effect. And so anyway, the question comes, what do we do? Not projected to need a roundabout for, like I said, a number of years. This road is currently not on the COG corridor, and corridor plan, is that what it's called? CMPO master plan. It's not listed there, either one, the 3rd South or 238. And so funding is limited on this. So the ability of funding for this, if we want to go for funding for COG, is the potential of engineering. We don't have a 90% design, so we can apply for engineering costs. And we could apply for engineering costs that will have a minimum impact on the intersection. I don't know whether that one's in, oh, here we go. So we could come in here, and if we brought in and widened the road to the entire north of our right of way that we currently have, we could potentially come and hug that right of way. It may allow a sidewalk, it may not, but we could hug that right of way, and if we draw it up, there is potential that we could line up. Now, this isn't a design, this is an engineering design. That's what we're looking for, is to say, if we need a shorter term solution than a roundabout in 10 plus years, if we came and we could get design money to figure out a solution. This is back of the napkin kind of drawing, says, hey, here's a potential, but not to the engineering level. So the COG application would be to apply to the COG for a grant to cover the engineering cost to find a solution for through traffic on 300 South. So that is ultimately that's what the application would be. Sean Dustin, his firm, is working with us on this application. We use various different firms in different ways, and so we've visited and he's graciously accepted to help us on this one, to help through the potential of putting this application together. And so I invite him, if you want to answer any more questions than what I've said. Do you have anything more to add to that at this point, or we want to go to questions?
I think I just reiterate what Ryan said. We appreciate the opportunity. You don't know me in this capacity. I intentionally not done civil engineering in Cache Valley for the last 8 years because it was just too complicated. As the mayor of Medley, and one of the city managers actually told me, I went in to talk to him about doing a project, and he just said, you know what? Engineers are a dime or a dozen, but I need your vote. And so I just, at that point, we dropped it. And so I appreciate the opportunity that Ryan's given us to come and talk to you guys about this. But yeah, I think that I really don't have much to add, Ryan. I think really what it comes down to is that in order to become eligible for funding, as Ryan and I have gone and talked to Jeff Gilbert and to the decision makers at the COG, in order to become eligible for funding, we really need to do this to open up the door, because eventually you are going to probably want to pursue, whether it's a roundabout or a signal, you know, as you pointed out earlier, we don't know a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of variables with all of these things. And 10 years may come and you may decide that a traffic signal is more appropriate, or you may decide all kinds of things, but there is an immediate need now. And that immediate need comes with the need for construction dollars. And until this is on that MPO master plan, then there won't be any construction dollars forthcoming from the MPO or from the COG. And so other than there's a spot improvement limit that's $300,000, and there's only so much you can do with that. So this is the logical first step, as Ryan and I have worked with Jeff in getting to the point where this corridor will be eligible for getting funding assistance.
The problem with not putting a roundabout there is that this realignment doesn't address the fact that it's difficult to get across that road at many times during the day. And it's kind of a dangerous intersection because people are
A terrible place for the safe routes plan to be.
right.
Terrible.
Right. So that would be my only concern, is that if we just do a fix and a realignment, then we still have the issue of the cross traffic. That's hard to get across there.
Well, one of the things that Ryan has asked us to look at in this process is the fix and realignment look like things that are achievable with the current status, you know, do the design this year and come back for funding up to that $300,000 level next year. That would allow you to fix the realignment issue, which would at least eliminate the diagonal crosswalk
Right.
at the intersection and get people there prepared for the idea that something's going to happen in the future. But Ryan was also very explicit in telling me that the long term was, you know, that realigning this is not the fix for this, that there is a long-term goal. And so anything that we do with this needs to keep that goal in mind. And one of the things that we would like to do is do at least some preliminary analysis of a roundabout and see, does it really take as much space as the one at First South? What really will it take in order to, so part of the deliverable might be, if the COG will allow it, you know, because it always comes back to funding. And if they'll allow it in the scope, then to look at that and say, what is the, you know, based on what we know today and what the issues are with the intersection today, what is the longer term fix?
So you've worked with the COG as in the capacity as mayor of Midway. Is there, if it's not actually on the plan, if you turn an application, does that help it get on the plan? Does it sort of, or does it, I just feel like they're not usually going to approve money for things that aren't on their plan.
So there's,
So is it sort of just like
yeah,
a baby step in the process that we hope they might include it in their plan? Because I feel like from our past experience with COG application on 100 South, of course, there was a lot of other maybe.
There was a drone.
Or other
Things
stuff
so-
going on in there.
So if it's not on the plan, there's a limit, like he says, to 300,000. So that's the limit threshold. They update the plan every 4 to 5 years, and they're in the update this year. So it can't be funded through this year. So applying for the spot improvement potentially gets us a year ahead. And then it gets on we would expect it to get on the plan next year. And then we could apply after it's on the plan, then we could apply for some. But it says, do we need to fix it to the full roundabout and spend the $1 million plus now? Or is the 300,000 and getting that and then having time to build that right away? Because that's going to be one of our biggest struggles, is acquiring right away potentially, and it could take years. And I think if you apply for right away, and that would be probably the next step, is we fix it for the next however long, and then we apply to COG for right of way, and then we start to work to acquire that right of way over the next however many years that'll take us, and then eventually we come to the roundabout. But this looks to try to figure out a solution as we're going. So anyway,
So the
that's what
answer is yes, we feel like this process will put us on the map.
Yeah, 'cause
it'll help.
basically what you have to do, one is, and Ryan's been a very effective advocate for the city in those meetings. Because one of the questions was, why isn't 238 already on the CMPO master plan? The CMPO master plan is supposed to have regionally significant roads, but 238/2nd is broad. It's got River Heights, the stakeholders are River Heights, Providence, the county, Millville, the county again, and Nibley. And I wasn't aware of this until our meeting this week, but it also is the only county road that goes through cities. And it doesn't just go through cities, it goes through this whole quarter of the valley. And so.
And it's significant as a transportation corridor
Right.
for lots of people.
Right. And I have to own some of the blame because I knew that it was, but I never brought it up and asked for it to be on the MPO because I knew it would compete with me for funding for other stuff. Because it is a complicated road. But Ryan's been really effective in working with Jeff and with Matt Phillips to make that case. And I know that getting stuff onto the MPO plan can actually be, COG and MPO are really interesting animals because they're presented as this firm set process, but there's a lot of wiggle room in there that, so like it's presented as they only change it every 4 years, but you can also ask for an amendment to the MPO plan and they'll put it on. So a letter from the mayor with council support that says that this road ought to be on the MPO plan. It's to get to where Ryan is trying to go. It is a stepwise thing. We can't go from 0 to 60 like that. And the steps are, as he laid out, it's basically go in for the spot improvement money to get attention, send the letter to the MPO and make the request that it get onto the transportation plan and onto the COG master plan, because now there's going to be a COG master plan, which there never has been in the past. And then the third step is to actually get in there and do, if you're funded, get in there and do that evaluation and design, say, all right, what exactly do we want to do here, and be ready so that when it is on the MPO, that next year when the funding cycle comes around, you're able to go in and I think we ought to be able to try to get to the 30% design with the roundabout or the future intersection with this draw, because if we can do that, then next year we could come back for the right-of-way money. And once you're in there for right-of-way money, then it's really hard for them to turn you down for the full package because they've already recognized that it's an important project and that it needs to be funded at some level. So
Jeff is extremely reasonable too.
Yeah.
He understands the issues.
Yeah, he understands the issues with this one. And I think the most encouraging thing
was when Brian and Matt were talking and Matt is if you don't know Matt, he's the county engineer. And he said, yeah, this is absolutely regionally significant. It ought to be on there. And that went for 1700 South, and I guess it was 1700 South, 300 South.
We call it 300 South.
Yeah, gotta be careful. I can't remember where I am.
Which
Right.
at Blackhawk, it becomes 17.
Well, 300 South ought to be on that same plan. And it's notable that all the way from Highway 89, you're up into Providence, 1700 South, 300 South are not on those plans. So I don't think that they're intentional oversights. But well, intentionally left off, but I think that they are oversights because they've been so tricky that nobody has really pushed it yet. But I think it's a good time to push it now. So.
And there's no downside. I mean, there's going to be the hard thing of the acquisition, but there's no downside.
The downside is that the city would have to pay 7% as the match.
We would pay a match.
Okay. Let's get the money.
This is a public hearing.
That's what I said.
So-
Kind of like
no,
that.
so-
My
So,
paper.
so this is a public hearing for all of the public to weigh in on this application. So that's why we're here. So we're excited that we have public.
Appreciate having you on board. It's public comment. Hal, have you got a comment?
Listening to the whole thing, it seems to me like if it's something that has to be done sooner or later, and you can kind of backdoor this thing to get into where you want to get to, what are you waiting for? Got to do it. Because sooner or later, you're going to have to do it anyway. So, I mean, and the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be.
Well,
That's
tonight
very
you
true.
represent the public.
Yeah.
So tell us to go for
Yeah, go for it.
it.
Absolutely. If I'm representing the public, I encourage you to continue and go for it.
We love it. Thank you.
Mayor, comment.
Yes.
No, maybe it's not appropriate for me to comment right now. We're in public hearing.
Well, we'll close the public hearing and then we'll take comment from the council. So unless someone else has something to say, I'll close that portion of the meeting and now we can discuss it for a moment.
Any online comments?
Oh, yeah. I didn't
I
even
didn't
think
see any.
those, right?
Not that I've seen.
Okay.
Everyone's a back to school night.
Over. They're at the pickleball tournament then.
Well, that's
It's
over
almost
too.
over.
Okay, Brent, your comment.
I'm always concerned about the impact that it has on the properties that are adjacent to these streets. I know there's issues concerning them. We studied the one up on 3rd East and 2nd North, and that offset intersection's problematic and the impact that it has there. We're looking at the one here, and I'm wondering, is there, somebody mentioned the semaphore, some kind of control lights. Is that a reasonable solution to this intersection? Because I don't know how much foot traffic is there, but is that a reasonable solution to that intersection?
To signalize it. I think at this point, this part is to identify how the road actually would line. I think signalizing, the problem with the first signal in a city is the cost of getting everything you need to maintain and run a signal. Once you get a signal, the second signalized intersection is cheaper. If the county maintained this and had other signalized lights, which I don't know that they do, I'm only aware that Logan and the state have signalized intersections in the valley. That I believe those are the only two entities that have but it would be state managed and operated.
Lewiston has a, I don't know if that's on their state road going to Franklin, they have a flashing.
Yeah. It's I don't know, it probably is state. Normally there is a big jump between when you're able to have the ability to manage those. But if the county had it and would maintain it, certainly could be an option for the county to do. Ours, because of the joint jurisdiction, we run into an issue. Half this road is the county and half is ours. That's why we're looking at how we line up 300 South to the intersection for the best flow. But it's not a no, it's just, we're looking for the underlying and then going to that as possible, or stop signs, or eventually the roundabout, or there's other possibilities. That's right. That's absolutely right.
Well, and the cost of a signal, by the time you get poles and signals and all those kind of things.
I don't know that that's true.
I'm not sure it's
Well,
true.
could it be explored?
Yeah,
Can be
I'm
explored.
thinking that's probably what
Right of ways and stuff like
engineering
that.
will do. Well, right now, I'm gonna leave that in Ryan's hands. But it certainly doesn't hurt to have the information so that we can make an informed decision.
I guess it'd be important to know what the cost is of the equipment, how that plays into it. So I know that when we looked at it in the transportation plan a couple of years ago, now I feel like I'm old, since I've been here for a hot minute. I don't think that was brought into the options. It was the actual cost of construction, not the O&M.
And both are issues, but we can certainly look if you're interested in stoplights.
I just
Piece of
worry about,
information, I don't know.
I just worry about the impact of the two homes that are there in that offset intersection.
Stoplight would come in, and with that arm, it'd sit right in their front yard.
I can tell you because I have a front yard with a signal in it down on the farm. We took a ton of our land to do those signals down there.
And generally they're lit, and so at that point they're a LED light Cobra on top of them. That would be
Huge impact on the residents in those homes.
but it's something we can look at. I mean, at this point we're on the first step of many in a journey to try to figure this out.
Maybe we could also, I traveled a little bit in Canada, and their roundabouts are not huge. Their roundabouts are pretty small. I was surprised.
Same with Denmark.
What's that?
Same with Denmark.
Yeah, they're not
They're
huge.
tiny.
Yeah, but they were. Yeah. They got on somebody's bumper, but they were.
They're all different sizes in Spain.
Yeah. I don't know, if there's, that was a huge roundabout, if it could be shrunk down somewhere, if the situation a little bit, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's multiple possibilities here. And we're looking to investigate farther into it. That's what we'd like to
Let's
do.
start a trend of little roundabouts. Okay, so we've closed the public hearing. Ryan, just educate all of us on the steps. Do you need a vote from us to do further investigation into it? To write letters to COG?
I don't think you need to write letters to COG. The requirement is a public hearing and notice. I don't know that a motion would be needed or items, so,
Right.
yeah. And then the application is next week, so
We just have to include this in the application.
we include the minutes and we go from there.
Okay, that makes
So-
it simple. Okay, so we will close that portion of the meeting and move to item number 4, Idle 3 City Proclamation. Thanks, Sean. I got a call from an individual who is trying to get more cities who are committed to asking their citizens to be idle-free. And so I told her that we would do a proclamation. We can do as little or as much as we want to get people on board to work on being idle-free. We do have some drive-in things, not a lot, but we're going to get some. But I do see a number of cars idling. And if we just remind people to turn them off, because that puts pollutants in our air, and we're coming up on the winter season. So I've got this proclamation. Let me just read it to you. It was included as part of your agenda. Whereas Utah has had the first idle-free campaign in the nation, and 2022 marks the 5th anniversary of the idle-free, 15th anniversary of the idle-free declaration issued by the governor of Utah. Whereas we see to educate the idle-free campaign as a key goal of Utah's energy action plan. Whereas the Utah Clean Cities, along with all Utah School District and Utah State Board of Education, developed and put into place a school bus idling reduction program and elementary student education plan, informing youth and general public about the benefits of reduced idling. Whereas the grassroots idle-free education program developed in Utah Clean Cities has grown with support from the Utah legislature, including Clean Air Act, Clean Air Caucus, Utah Clean Air Partnership, Breathe Utah, Utah Society for Environmental Education, and the State Health Department's Utah Asthma Program and Recess Guidance, and has reached more than 15,000 students across 450 schools: Alta, Cottonwood Heights, Draper City, Holiday, Logan, Murray, Park City, Salt Lake City, and Sandy, by having idle-free ordinances. Whereas we applaud actions to support idle-free efforts to improve air quality. Now therefore, I, Kathleen Alder, Mayor of the City of Providence, do hereby declare September and the 2022-23 winter season as idle-free in Utah. So given that, do we need a vote on this?
I had one question when I read it. I didn't quite understand why it said September and the 20, so it's like the month of September and then
Starting in the
December.
month of September through the school year.
Oh, that's not what it says though, I don't think. I think because I read it and winter starts December 23rd. So I thought the month of September and December 23rd through.
Oh,
So it's just a little, I just wasn't sure what it meant.
let's
So it's
change the
September
wording
through.
on that.
Simple, but sounds great.
September. through the
Idle free.
rest of
I
the
need to
year.
go turn my car off. I've had it running this whole time. Sorry.
Shame on you.
It's not September yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Turn it back on. Right, sounds great.
Should be fine till then.
So do we need a vote from the council on this? Ryan?
Sure. It's nice to have the council,
Support it.
support it.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt, thank you. Why don't you make the motion? You got to pick the
I'll
words.
second it.
Okay, I move that we adopt this idle-free proclamation that Kathleen has brilliantly written and that we all practice it ourselves September through winter. So
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I,
Motion carries.
I
Thank you.
just have a small comment. CCID does an amazing job with having idle-free signs all down their pickup. And it's a good reminder, like I'm not a big idler, but I see that sign and I'm like, oh yeah, turn it off, you know, even if it's just for a few seconds, like turn that car off in the winter. And I think that we could support this by maybe putting some at Providence pickup and Spring Creek or other.
Yes, and this can grow. We can get more people involved. But she, when she asked me if I would, if our city would do this, there was a time constraint for her to have us give this in, and so I brought it, but we can certainly do more things to get more people involved, to remind them. Okay, thank you. Hal, you have to come to the mic. You're gonna speak.
Just a suggestion. As far as trying to get these signs put up, especially around the schools, places where, what about approaching businesses to see if they would sponsor, a sign that they could put their name on, we're a supporter of this, and to save the city some money, see if the business community would be willing to help.
Do I hear a volunteer
I-
that wants to do that?
I'm just, I just thought,
It is a good idea.
the businesses would like to, I'm sure would support it.
Yes,
And so.
Thank
just a
you.
Suggestion.
thank you. It saves all of our lungs too in the wintertime when we have inversions. Okay, thank you, everyone. We've got item number 5 on the agenda is the Providence City Code codification. The council will review, discuss, and may take action on the current codification of the city code. If approved, the codified code will be open to comments for 30 days before final adoption by the council. So we've talked about this extensively, but we now have it back in our court. Hi, would you like to bring us up to speed?
This has been going on for a while now. This is one of the first things Brian talked about when I first came on, over a year ago, is what we wanted to do. Usually cities codify their code every 7 to 10 years. I believe we did a legal review a couple of years ago. That kind of scratched the surface, but nothing as in depth. The last time we did something like this was, I think we discussed 20 plus years ago. So hopefully you've gone through these exhibits and you've kind of seen the need for why we're doing this and the benefit. The first exhibit, the code committee revision, is what the committee did when we went through the code. You'll see it's very colored, comments on comments. We have stuff that's been crossed out, it's been redlined. That's just kind of our starting point. We really broke it down, went through section word by word, and just kind of pulled it apart. This is what we handed over to our codifying attorney, Municode and Civil Plus or Civics Plus, and they came back with this codified main comments. Originally, he had 50 to 60 comments, kind of issues, and we came back together as a committee and kind of worked it out, fleshed it out a little more, and he came back with a lot less questions. And so those are his concerns and questions, and our response on what we wanted. The strike-through version, unfortunately, isn't redlined, but that gives you an idea of all the changes that we're making, the things we're taking out, the things that we're adding or revising. We're not doing any kind of cultural shifts. I kind of like what Janelle said kind of at the beginning of the meeting. It was kind of very much editorial is what we're doing. We're trying to bring it up to code, to state code again. Like I said, it's been 20, 30 years since we've done something like this. This is just kind of our introduction to you all on where we're currently at. So I'm just looking for the green light for you guys to let us put it out there for the public, for you guys to continue reviewing it for the next 30 days for your comments. And
I just looked through it this afternoon.
yeah, there's a lot.
Do you have a copy on Audible that I can get? Drive it.
Yeah.
Nice strike through. We don't want you to go to sleep while you're driving.
You have to have a good narrator for it, though.
Yeah,
Really good voice.
One that can put lots of.
I'm glad you recommend that though, because it was impossible for me to read through the whole thing in 24 hours. It wasn't
Yeah.
impossible. I chose not to read through the whole thing in 24 hours.
yeah.
I could have done it,
I mean, if any of you did over the weekend,
but I think it's good to
congratulations.
start with 30 days and I've got 30 days like everybody else. to
Yeah.
get through it.
Hopefully you'll take this time to go through the exhibits and really break it down. I mean, the idea is to make it more concise, again, bring it up to date. We want to make sure that we don't get caught on anything, by residents that, come back to bite us. What you don't see here is the hyperlinks. We will have hyperlinks to the state code when we do roll this out, which will be very nice. We also what we did is we grouped definitions in one section. So if you compare the two codes, you'll see that each section has its own definition. And we saw that caused a lot of problems, a lot of duplication, a lot of inconsistencies. So we did group them all together. So that's really nice, something big that we did. As well as made it more gender neutral. There are a lot of parts, because this was 30 years ago, a lot of he, she stuff that we just kind of made, they, them, just more acceptable, kind of brought it in the 21st.
Probably not a lot of she's in there.
Yeah. No, yeah,
Mostly
I
he's.
saw that. And there's a couple of codes in there that you could really write that or have that still in there. But yeah, so again, we're just kind of presenting it. Hopefully you guys will take the next 30 days and go over it. You see that we do have the final draft from the Unicode attorney, but what we talk about is this kind of a living document, constantly always changing. You always constantly have the power to update it. This is something that will be set in stone, that we have to wait another 7-10 years before we can touch it and update it. We're always amending the code, kind of what Jeff indicated earlier, how do we go about fixing some of this stuff? Once we get this foundation set, we have something to go off of. As you see, we cleaned up a lot. I think we took out a lot of unnecessary stuff, so it looks a lot more concise and clean. So hopefully you guys are ready to take it to that next stage. I'll do a public hearing for our next meeting, get it out there to the public and see what they say, and then you guys come back with your comments, and then if need be, we'll revise it, add those comments, and continue moving forward. Any questions?
We spent a lot of nights reading, didn't have fun, Jeff, had fun on the committee. But I think that as we work through it, and I think that as you guys review it over the next 30 days, you'll see things that are kind of stick out like sore thumbs, obvious places where we should revisit and revamp the code. So I would just ask that you keep kind of a running list as you review it of the places where you think we should put some energy into, and depending on what it is, some of it, and I think this kind of alludes to what Jeff said at the beginning, some of the sections, because they're land use oriented, have to get started in the planning commission. I think we can start that domino from our end to say, we think this needs updated. We want to change some of these things around and get them to look at some of the different sections as well. And I think maybe that's what you're asking for, to say which sections,
What's the exact process
what's the
for
process for the
updating
different
a
sections.
certain code? What, do we put that on the agenda, have a discussion, and then
Yeah,
propose a?
lots of times what'll happen in some of that is, one, we want a firm foundation to start from, and there's so many different things that this brings us back to a good foundation to start from. So that's why we have a few recommendations. You'll get recommendations from the public to make changes that you've seen. You'll get recommendations from staff, and we have a list that we compile and we're working on. We have a list of some that from yours that were a little bit more substantive, maybe a change in where it is more than editorial. So we've gained that list, and I think we had some of those. And then once we, the whole from our side is, once we get this one, then we can make through, either we can get a consistent going by titles to kind of evaluate the culture, the farther depth, or you're always welcome to bring in and bring the staff will help you bring a red line version of what you want to change, highlight it, give us an idea. As you have a section, you say, hey, this is what I'd like to see this, and come, we'll visit with you. We'll help you to understand maybe some of the effects both ways of a change. And then we'll put it in an ordinance for you or resolution ordinance. We'll let you know if that one has to go through planning commission or not. And then we'll help draft the ordinance language. But if you have a specific one, it's nice to be able to take a red line document of where you're thinking. It's harder for us as staff that if you have it more in theory and saying, I really would prefer something more in this realm. it's a little harder for us, but we can work some of that in if there's some of that and we need to do some research for other city codes. But there's lots of ways that it'll come. So there's not one avenue it starts at. There is a process that if we have to have a public hearing, we need the approved or the change in front of the council before they can act. So we have to have a drafted document in ordinance format before it comes. Our fixes are based on red line. That's how we correct it. But it comes that way, has a public hearing for almost all code changes. Will have a public hearing, and that public hearing may or may not be at planning commission, depending on what type of law it is. And ultimately, every law change comes and is voted on by the council. That is no other body votes for a law change. You are the legislative body, the legislature, and all laws are passed by you. Does that make sense? So I don't know whether that's fully descriptive enough or not.
So over the year, like the years that I was chair of the planning commission, there were some things that we identified that clearly were a problem as people came in and wanted to build certain things or do certain things. And so Ryan and Scarlett have lists of things that we could start on that have already been identified that are an issue. So we can begin those changes.
So I say make your list and we'll compile them together and we'll work together as legislators for the city to make it clear and concise and
Well, and more
up-to-date
user friendly
more
for,
user-friendly.
we want to make
And some
sure
things
that-
I've learned, and I brought this up when I read through the code, some of you have maybe gotten through the whole thing, maybe not. And some of the things are required in state code, like we discussed, like the sexually oriented businesses. It's pretty like specific and detailed in there, like very specific language. I was like, did we need to be this specific? But that's state required. So it's useful as we have these discussions, what we know is in our ability to change, and some things are not in our sandbox.
It will also be good to have the hyperlinks in there. So then that tells us that that is a state required issue that we need to cover.
Yeah, and hopefully if somebody's looking at it and we want to have state required items, but not quoting state code when it might change. And that link puts us back to keeping us up to date so that we have that. If the state code changes, our code keeps current with it. So.
If we have items that we question, write the page, what the item is, submit it to staff.
It's a Tony and I, and we'll go from there. Yep.
Okay. So do we need a motion on this, or this is, we're presenting?
We're
this-
asking you to move this to public hearing is basically what we're asking. If we boil this down, we want you to vote to move it to public hearing.
Okay,
That's
so
the
I will
next step.
entertain a vote then.
Make a motion that we proceed to move the city code codification to the public hearing stage.
Okay, we need a second.
I'll second that.
Second by Jeff. Any further discussion? All in,
Thanks to all, Ty, Ryan, Jeff, Janelle,
I mean, through all that.
and Scarlett. Wow. So much work. Thank you.
It's a lot. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Property acquisition, Ryan, do we have anything in there?
I just tell you that we have a few in the pregnant stage, but haven't been delivered yet. Yes, is that's the analogy that's been used by.
That's not gender neutral.
So-
I don't know, do you say?
I don't know how that goes. So there is a few that we have talked about in some closed sessions. They aren't quite mature enough for a contract to vote on. They're still being worked on. We got our appraisal back from one. We've discussed numbers on the other and we're getting close. We're just trying to get some of those finalized details before we bring it back. So that's the acquisitions we do have. Through the cemetery, we had to go through a conditional use permit, and we are granting ourselves the land around for a few pieces around the cemetery to divide them up so that the county will approve our conditional use permit. Those aren't really acquiring or divesting, but we have to write it up and give it to ourselves so that they can get a new. We're just actually not even changing boundary. We are just getting new parcel ID numbers. We're just looking to get new parcel ID numbers on what we already have boundaries on. So anyway, it's an odd one. Fits in that kind of realm, I guess, but just want to let you know. So nothing else there. And I don't have anything for a closed session. So we'll just go to staff reports when you're ready.
Okay. Public Works. How fast can you get us out of here?
Well, pretty fast.
Good.
Questions?
I got dropped in my house, by the way, because they were spraying the road. in front of my-
Today was a chaotic day.
Yeah.
There's
I
no
thought of
doubt.
you all day. I
It was-
thought
it was
all of your
pretty
staff probably thought this was a top their list. of
Well, they're out
Monday.
there in the road keeping people from
We had a lot
going.
of human
Diverting
barricades.
traffic on the back.
Between the county and all of Providence, we had a lot of helpful volunteers. We brought some people out of the woodwork to stick a cone on their head. And it was quite a busy day.
It's awesome though. The streets look wonderful.
We accomplished a lot, really, for preservation, for the amount that we did this year. I'm super excited because we didn't do any last year. We did all the whole road rebuilds. And so we were kind of I was feeling a little behind on the whole preservation treatments. Caught up in a good way this year because we did over 20 blocks of road preservation. We've still got 3 that'll probably occur this weekend if weather plays nice. They kind of got missed on our HA5 plans, but the chip seal and top coat got completely finished today, the emulsion on it. So that's good roads. It's hard to watch the fiber crews go through it, but if we got things like chip seal, it kind of helps make me feel a little bit better on that. The switch to the reservoir. The reservoir is pretty much just waiting on the DDW's operating permit. So there's a few loose ends here and there, but my attention is pretty much shifted and focused now on the next CIP goal, which is the new reservoir. We need to drill another hole. To Brent's earlier statements about water up the canyon, I've been super grateful that we've been able to utilize that spring a little bit more this year. It's actually made quite the difference in the way I see the trending in our reservoir levels. I think a shout out should go to the public. I think they have conserved this year because our numbers are down, and being able to utilize that spring more has definitely helped our pumping costs, both in the wells and the booster pumps. So
Something like 20 million gallons less, isn't it? At this time this year versus this time last year?
For total,
Yeah.
I think we've used more than 20 million out
No,
of the
no, no. I
Broad
think
Hollow.
we've used that much less.
Oh, I don't know that's that high, but maybe.
it's
We had quite a bit of
for the
reduction last year.
3 to 4 weeks. It's 1.5 million a day less than normal. So people for the last month, ever since they maybe got their July bill, maybe people have cut back in the last 3
Yeah.
4 weeks in a big way, which is great. And being able to utilize that spring water has definitely helped the wells, which is what we need. But we do need another well, so I'm shifting my direction towards finding the location for that next. We've started stripping the dirt off the top of the reservoir at the mouth of the canyon, so we're make sure that cap is secure like you've seen in the water master plan. So that process has begun as well.
Okay. Thanks for your great work. Your crews are doing an awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
Anything
Commission has been quiet. We are kind of at the stage, we don't have a lot of big areas to have big subdivisions come in anymore. So, but it will get a little bit noisy. Land use is not quiet. We are still doing a lot of residential site plans, and we're getting more commercial site plans and things like that. So we're staying busy. It's just a different type of busy. Once we get through this initial codification, then the planning commission will get noisy again, because we will start, as Mayor said, there's been a list that we've been looking at, and there's a few things in state code that we want to update to and things like that. So we will get busy in the planning commission. They won't get any more breaks as soon as you guys adopt this new framework for us. So that'll be exciting. We are, our stormwater person, Colton Love, is a great asset. Within just a few days, he had gone through the class and took his test and certified as a registered stormwater inspector. He's been out with our former stormwater person, Mitch Turley, and he's also been out with Rob. Does he have his 10?
Yes.
Okay, and so he's moving right along to get that. He's also been very instrumental in code compliance, working with people out there and trying to bring a few more people into line. It's been an unusual last 18 months, as far as we've got a lot of really cool, I've talked about it before, but we have a lot of really creative people that are doing really cool things, but they don't work with our city code. So it's kind of challenging, because retaining walls and rock walls and fences and different things like that. We're struggling a little bit to try and get people to stay compliant, and it is an expensive fix on some of them. So you may hear some rumblings when we start telling them.
Might get some phone calls.
The one that you did work with, I'd like to report they've cut theirs down. They've removed it. They've been working with the building inspectors, and so that's progressing the way it should be.
But it was a good solution, and I think it came out all right.
Yes. Did you have a question, Janelle?
Well, you mentioned fences. I know you told me you followed up with the resident we talked to before.
Still not there.
It's not there, and I do feel like, I haven't actually read the code, but you told me I can't remember, so the 5-foot fence, what the
Yep.
self-watching do.
And I sent him all of that stuff.
I just hope that they'll listen to what the code is, because it appears what is being constructed is not to code.
That was what I was trying to say. Not just that one, unfortunately. It's a lot. There are more people being creative than not, unfortunately.
Do we get ahead of this? Is there any way to communicate and try to get ahead of this? Because I just feel so badly to make people do expensive. I'm wondering if we need some sort of campaign, more newsletter entries
Maybe
or
in the
something.
newsletter.
Like there's laws,
Just-
like the
just-
city has laws.
Yeah, but I don't think a lot of people do them maliciously here. I think
They just don't know that
I
they
just
need
don't think
a
they
building
know.
permit.
And boy,
Or
I just, and
I
also,
don't think they do
like just
maliciously. either.
doing that once, and saving someone 10 grand would make me feel really good.
Yeah.
Because we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of violations. It just,
I think we save lots of people lots of time when we meet with them, they call, they'll ask questions. We get quite a bit. I think when somebody comes and they don't know and they're well intentioned maybe, but at some point maybe they're new and they haven't read the last 3 newsletters or we can do a lot of that. But we'll always have some of that and we don't have eyes everywhere. And so some of it comes by report. We educate the neighbors, and the neighbors oftentimes are the ones that will report in. So the education are getting done and we get it.
I just bring up
So-
Strata said It sounds like. it's been
Yeah.
in- Okay, so,
I think the thing of it is too, because of that, we really encourage people to come in. We don't want to add steps. We've been working with another entity that we feel like has added steps to be adding steps. And we don't want to do that, but we are encouraging people to come in and we want them to have their application ready and it may be even submitted, but a pre-application meeting with us so that we can go over, and we do bring up stormwater and we bring up retaining walls and we bring up fences, things that normally you don't talk about in a residential zoning review because you're looking at their site plan to make sure it fits the setbacks and everything, but we are going a little bit beyond that. We're talking to them about landscaping and things like that in that pre-application review, because what we found out is as they get to building, they've always had some of this other stuff in mind, but it's not stuff that you would normally show on a site plan. So they move forward thinking that they've got all kinds of approval, and we had no idea that that's what they were going to do. These discussions, these pre-application meetings have been very helpful, both on our staff side and on the applicant side.
Do site plans take into consideration the topography of a lot, or do they mostly deal with the boundaries of the lot?
They don't have to show all of the topography on the lot unless it's a sensitive area unless it's a setback area. But one of the things we are running into a little bit, we've got one right now that we're working with, or that we're going to start working with, is they forget that they have easements or stormwater detention facilities in their yard, or they forget the importance of them. And they think that if they modify them just a little bit, it's not going to make a difference. But if any of you looked at some of our stormwater retention, when we had some of those big rains the last little while, it does make a difference. We do need that. It's not just a line on a map that we made a developer do to meet a certain code. And so,
Well, and if they change that and flood the neighbors down the street, that's a problem for them.
yeah, so we're working with people to try and, it's like Josh, I don't think that it's malicious on it. I guess maybe somebody out there is, but I really don't think so. I think it's more a lack of understanding and even education, but mainly understanding. But we're working really hard to reach out to people and try, and that's one thing that Colton's trying to do is catch it earlier on than what we have been. If we can see when he's out doing his stormwater compliance inspections on construction sites and stuff, if he can see that they're starting to do forms for something that wasn't on the plan, then we start trying to talk earlier instead of later. So we're working on it.
Well, in existing homes that all of a sudden decide that they want another feature.
Yeah.
And another fence, they don't realize that they need to come in for a permit to do that.
Yeah. But anyway, and some of it will be some of the ordinance cleanup that we'll be working on and things like that. Get a lot of calls about Airbnbs now. People wanting to do them for investment, people wanting to do them just as part of their home. We're getting quite a few calls. They're not following through with the process, so I'm hoping that they're not just doing them and skirting the process, but we are getting a lot of calls on that. That's one of the ordinances that I think we need to look at really quickly. It's a land use one, so it'll be one of the ones that council has to, or the planning commission gets the first shot at. Our recreation, we're kind of in the quiet time of the year. We've got flag football registration is just about to finish, and those games will start in September. The soccer program in the fall is run through Cache Valley Soccer or South Cache Soccer, so we just support them and they utilize our fields. They pay to utilize our fields, which makes a good partnership. And then we'll be looking towards visit with Santa Claus after you guys have your fantastic celebration this week, and I
Yes,
won't
I'm-
steal that thunder.
I'm
And
so
then
excited about that.
on the fun side of things for the staff, we have a couple of things that we do annually. One of them's a paper airplane contest, and we started a cornhole contest last year. And we actually have the winners of our cornhole contest. Rob Stapley and Ty, they were our winning team, so shout out to them. So just a little trivia fun for you. But
Scarlett, I noticed in the codification that they were removing the request for a requirement for a permit for a rock retaining wall less than 4 feet. Is-
That's a building code thing. They still need a zoning. See, that's where it's confusing to people. There's a zoning clearance and then there's building code. And a lot of people think they're one and the same, and they're not. Because building code requires a building permit at 4 feet. Well, retaining walls are just really hard because they're engineered things. And if they're retaining a certain surcharge, then even if they're less than 4 feet, they might need engineering. And so they're kind of tricky in and of themselves, but that doesn't get them out of needing a zoning.
Okay, so they still have the requirement for a zoning clearance.
Yep.
Okay,
And
that's good.
And,
Because I'm
and
worried
maybe
about
we need to
that.
make that sound. Maybe that's one of the things we really need to look at as we start going in deep dive after we get this foundation passed, is making sure that people understand that there's a difference between zoning and building. They work together, but they are different.
I
And
can see the building permit. Yeah, from the city.
yes. Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Just a quick reminder, the Historic Preservation, they're doing their walking tour event tomorrow at the Rock Church at 6 o'clock. Guys have time, bring your families, come by, take a little walk. They'll be handing out their little pamphlets as well as an insert that shows their new plaques that are throughout the city. So,
And they're starting at the Rock Church.
yeah, so they'll be there at the Rock Church. They're not going to be walking around with anyone. But they'll be there to hand out, so come with your kids and you'll see a little tour of the houses and stuff, so should be fun.
Thank you. Ryan? Pressure's on.
Let's see if I can. All right. Fiber, we are 90+% complete with phase 2, which is our first phase. What's that? Zone 2, you're correct. Zone 2, I said phase 2. Oh, zone 2 is 90% complete. We're moving into zone 1. Our pond cabinet has been set. They're going to start rolling in the fiber and setting it, and that will open up the ability for more connections to come on in zone 1. So we're over 250 active users on our network and continuing to grow. So we're excited about that. We have a good even balance between all of our ISPs. They're excited. They've opened up business market. We have over, I think we had over 4 that have business packages. We're working currently on trying to get them to install some of the city stuff while they're in between. And we're going to start connecting the city local area network to each of the different sites for our SCADA system and pulling all of those in. So anyway, we're working, things are making good progress there. There is obviously things that we work on and schedules and all of those things. But progress is being made. The code update, I think Ty did a great job in doing that. Keep in mind, unlike the master plan that we said and we use, the code, this is creating a foundation. We still have the walls to put on. We have everything else to go. This phase isn't to be understood as an all or nothing. This is the foundational phase, and we want to work the rest of the as the code as it goes. This builds and grows onto it, and that's why you'll have heard from both Ty and Scarlett that once we get this one passed, then there are others. But because they change significantly, we don't feel like they're necessarily wrapped into the code codification. They're the next step in this process. So this is a multi-tiered process somewhat different than master plans, but we've treated the open to 30 days, and we want to make sure that there's ample time to review both public and council. And hopefully that is, and then we can move on to several other ones. 100 South is progressing. We've gotten the water services in. We're going to start excavating the road. I would say that the worst is yet to come. In the next couple weeks. It will be dug down to the deepest, and then it will start to get better. And so if you get calls, if you have complaints or anything like that, let me know. I've tried very hard to make sure that goes smoothly and as best as possible. But we are working through some of that. I just, our electronic vehicle charging station, kind of a little thing that we've added this year, and we're able to achieve. They give me reports, and I trust what I guess I have to trust what they give me, but they tell me that based on the usage of our electronic vehicle charging station, we have avoided 1,796 kilograms of greenhouse gas. So adding to that with our idle city, they convert that into planting a tree. They say that's like planting 46 trees and letting it grow for 10 years. Okay, so anyway, as we talk about idling, as we talk about promoting, I think those things go together.
Is it a supercharger?
It is not the most
It's a trickle
expensive
charge?
charger. It is a phase 2 charge, so it's not phase 1. It is phase 2, but it isn't the.
It's not like plug it into your house.
Are there people on staff that use it, or is it, who's using it?
Plant all the trees.
Great question. We have had an average of 10 new unique users each month. So we're gaining different and unique users each month. I haven't seen a lot of staff. I will tell you that my wife has come to visit and she has used it a couple of times. So the electricity is paid with the city. So we're paying about an extra $50 to $100 a month in electricity. So there is a little extra in electricity charge if we do that. So,
Great.
but anyway, but we are seeing quite a bit of usage at this point, so it's good. Sunday is probably the busiest day. That's what it says in the report. So, yeah. So anyway, ARPA funds have come in for our second tranche, which was 460,000. We've used those ARPA funds towards our building of the fiber because it's a project that's eligible and we use, which will ultimately reduce our, is expected to reduce our bond when we're done with the project, and we'll be able to come in on well, I was going to say that, but I don't know the number of connections. That would be our mystery. So I just hold my tongue on that one. Anyway, a couple of grants. I've been working with a couple of residents on a couple of different grants that are potentials. Two of them for a playground. I think you've heard from some of the need for a replacement of the playground. We found a couple of grant opportunities. And so I have some residents helping me in some of those, working together. And we're just working on trying to fulfill the grants we have, get more, and it's a continuous cycle. You'll see that we talked about one tonight. We talk about getting grants, we talk about using and planning and then building, and it's just a great fun little cycle. And I'll take questions.
And you got the grant for the city celebration.
Yep, we got a grant for the city celebration to cover up to $5,000, 25% match. So the city has theirs and donations. So yeah, we were able to get a grant there that came in.
And we have two things that people want to raise money for. One is for
Skate park is one.
A skate park is one, well, three things. The skate park, the cameras for the
Body cameras for the crossing guards.
crossing guards, and then the other one is for, we haven't kicked that one off yet, but it's for an all capabilities playground. Children who are in wheelchairs and
And
needing,
either adding that to a park or finding a place for that to
Right.
go.
so. Nice to have people come forward and say, we want this, but we're willing to help with the getting. the funding. It's great.
Any other questions? Anything else I can answer for you or help you?
Thanks for going after the grants. We appreciate that.
Yes. All staff.
We have an amazing staff. You should be proud
We do.
that Providence is very well represented among the staff. We have a staff that is caring and concerned about the public. We stress as much as the public does about making sure the roads get done well. Even if we get complaints of the times we do, we try very hard to plan it well. We watch the dates. We are subject to contractors and subject to others. But we are as conscious as any other resident. So
Do we anticipate 100 South being completed before snow flies? Well, before October. How's that? Because
Who knows when the
we don't
snow's
know
flying.
when the snow flies.
If we'll have snow. I mean, that's an
we
issue.
certainly hope so, but there is no guarantee, and we're not gonna extend ourselves to a guarantee on it.
How long do you think that there's left in the project?
Months. October will be close. If we can get to October, we can get done by November. So if we get done before the winter, we'll be happy.
They'll cheer for you. We
Thank you.
want you to be able to do that too.
We'll support you.
Okay, I think that close up and
Thank you. Thank you all. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Okay,
I'll second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.